I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth, and you're listening to the Von Dubcast. If you don't want to listen to me gap in the intro and you want to skip right to the interview, skip about 11 minutes. But before you do, please consider doing one of these couple things that really helps out the show. Following the social medias for the Von Dubcast, subscribing, and leaving a review. If you could do those things, that'd be awesome. Also, give me a subscription on the YouTube channel. That'd be great. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 108 of the Von Dubcast. Just got back to Grand Prairie yesterday on Saturday. Drove through some decent roads, we'll call them. At least the right lane was decent. The old lefty was a little snow-covered at times. Probably wasn't the smartest time to make that drive, but when you live in northern Alberta, that kind of... you get used to things like that. I feel like probably everybody but people that grew up here would probably look at that drive I did on Saturday and think, man, you're crazy. Why wouldn't you just stay? But you know what? Got through it, didn't die. Caught the end of the main card of the UFC, was able to get to Edmonton on Saturday so that I could go to the Jiu-Jitsu open roll on Sunday here. Just went to that this morning. It was tons of fun. Pretty happy with my decision. Got to see the Oilers have a good win. It was a great week I spent in Edmonton. Went up Monday, recorded an episode with Brendan Murphy, who's been on this podcast before. That was really fun. Tuesday, did I have one Tuesday or did I skip Tuesday? Maybe I didn't do a podcast Tuesday. I think I did one Wednesday with my old math teacher, Mr. Fisk Cameron. That was a really fun interview just to kind of explore how much you know somebody when you have a relationship that is very gated to, like a student-teacher relationship for most of our lives, and then to kind of break that barrier down and to see how on the money you are with who that person is, right? Because you're making your judgments, but when you're within a system that's kind of locked in like that, you can only see how much of a, right? Because they're obviously putting on a front. You're obviously putting on a front as a kid. He's putting on a front as a teacher. So, yeah, you get along within that framework, but you don't really know when you take those walls down, how it's going to work. And it was awesome. It was so much fun. Just the back and forth, the banter, the jokes. I just had such a fun time. It was really enjoyable. I hope he liked it too. It was fun. And I think probably everyone that went to high school and was taught by Mr. Fisk is really going to enjoy that episode. So that was really fun. So then that was Wednesday. Then Wednesday night, I was my birthday was Thursday. I was feeling, I don't know what, Wednesday night, just knowing that my birthday was the next day and kind of just me and my sister were at the house, and I was just feeling kind of down. I was really sad. I don't know what it was. I usually don't really care about things like birthdays or holidays, but for whatever reason, I was kind of down in the dumps that night. And luckily, my ex, Alyssa, came over to see the dog, and she was really nice, and she brought me a cake unannounced and didn't say nothing, and just it was really special. And I don't think she really knew how I was doing at that point. It was just there for me. It was really nice that night, and kind of, was something that I didn't think I needed, but I kind of did need that. And that kind of was set the table for the next day. Woke up, had a kind of a weird birthday, was kind of on my own for most of it, or thought I was going to be on my own for most of it. My sister had to work, and I was just at home with the dog, took her for a nice walk, had a really good day with her. And then my parents were supposed to come in later that night, and the day before, Courtney had asked me, what do you want for birthday dinner? I was like, oh, you don't have to make me a birthday dinner. No, what's your favorite thing? And I didn't want to be a bother. I was like, oh, well, probably ribs are my favorite, but that's a hell of a lot of work. So maybe like chicken Alfredo or something's probably easier, or this ramen place that she brought me one time. I was like, oh, if you ordered that, I'd be over the moon with that. That's awesome. I always love pierogies. Like, whatever's easy, just pick something easy. I don't need nothing fancy. So she wouldn't tell me what she's cooking. She gets home from work. We have a little chat. She watched the dog for me, which was so nice, and let me go check out the new, just the new to me gym in Edmonton, because I've been doing jiu-jitsu here in Grand Prairie, but I wanted to have a gym in Edmonton to try out. So I went to Gracie Baja and got to try that out. It was a little bit different. It's, all that work I put in at this gym in Grand Prairie just to get to know people and to not feel like that odd man out. It kind of felt kind of shitty to go back to the bottom of the totem pole where you don't know anybody, you can't really joke around, and it's a little bit more structured there and a little bit less laid back. So I think it's hard. I don't want to judge it just yet because I haven't had a real chance to get in there and kind of, work my magic and make people laugh and kind of see what type of camaraderie can be made there. I'm sure it seems like everybody else is getting along. I think on the first day, you're always going to feel a little bit on the side. But anyways, went to that, felt proud of myself for, getting on my comfort zone and going to try it out. And then got home, and Courtney had made me a spread, pierogies with, bacon and onions, chicken Alfredo, ribs, jalapeno poppers, and she got me donuts from Donut Party, these fancy donuts. It was just amazing of just how much she spoiled me. We watched the Oilers game. It was really, really nice. My parents ended up getting stuck in Slave Lake, so I didn't get to see them. They got home late, and I didn't get to see them. And I was just thinking of just how nice the day turned out for me. Telling everybody I didn't want nothing, and then I think kind of realizing, oh, maybe I did want something. I feel like I sometimes equate, I have such an issue with gifts, and I don't like gifts, but it is nice to have, something special. And they walked that line so nicely. And then on Friday, my mom made a big turkey dinner, mashed potatoes, everything. We did presents. It was nice. And the presents were perfect. They got me, Von Dubcast branded pens and a mouse pad and lots of Von Dubcast stuff that I really appreciate and that's special to me. And like, I, as much as I hate gifts, if it's a really good gift, I love it. I just hate running that risk and would rather just not go through the process. But it was just awesome how that worked out. So I had a great day Friday. Had a hot tub with Ingo. It was nice. Took the dog for some more walks and spent the last time because come the Saturday morning, I was supposed to have a podcast. Went to bed early, got all ready for it. Turned out couldn't do it. The guest had something come up, so last minute it got canceled. Changed my plans and came to ended up coming back to GP that day, but had to say goodbye to the dog because Alyssa's taken her for 2 weeks. And I think the last time we did the switch, when I had her for 2 weeks, it was so overwhelming to take care of her for those 2 weeks by myself that I was almost at a point where it was nice to get that freedom back. This time was not really the case. I think we had a lot more fun. We kind of, got our routine down, me and Soaks, and we were really having a good time. And oh man, I'm getting emotional just talking about it. Jeez, baby. Anyways, you guys know that. This is nothing news to you that I'm a big softie. But leaving the dog on Saturday, I knew that Alyssa was going to pick her up from work, from my family, that they'd watch the dog the rest of the day. But trying to leave that little mutt, I'm telling you guys, it was heartbreaking. And I know I'm going to see her soon, and I can, she sends me pictures of her all the time, and it's not that, but for whatever reason, maybe I was still emotional from all the birthday roller coaster and all that stuff. And, just stuff with Alyssa. I'm still, if I'm honest with you guys, I'm still pretty emotional over all that stuff. I don't think that, those wounds kind of scab over that quickly. So, whatever it was kind of sad, but you know what? That's life, and got through it and was able to get home, watch an awesome Oilers win, watch the rest of the fights, got to go roll jiu-jitsu, feeling good, hoping to plan a trip to Slave Lake to record more episodes. And speaking of Slave Lake, that's where our guest today, Denique, she's an old friend of mine. We were, I like to think I was friends with everybody in high school, but certain people more than others. And I think just in a small town, you think you know everybody. But when I graduated and went to, went off on my own path, I always got to watch Denique through social media and watch this quiet, reserved person kind of grow into this confident, passionate, artistic, beautiful person, just inside and out. And, reconnected with her and just kind of, I'm trying to remember back, this is probably years ago at this point, of just, saying like, oh, that's awesome. I'm really proud of what you're doing and all that. And just kind of watching from afar, and then, getting to know each other, just texting back and forth, DMs on Instagram, just anything kind of woo-woo, anything hippy-dippy. As I kind of got into that realm a little bit more, I'd always run it past Denique and kind of ask her, is this bullshit? Is there anything to this? And she would always kind of give the case for what it is. And even if I was really skeptical, she never gave me shit for it or judged me for that. She was fully accepting that I was taking it all in at my own pace, and whatever she could add to that, she added, but never really pushed. And I really appreciated that, because I think that's what kept that door open, kept me going back to ask her over some other people, because I knew there wasn't going to be judgment, whether what she had to say on the subject. Say it's just, for example, like horoscopes. Say she said, it gives me the rundown on what she thinks of horoscopes, and I go, yeah, that's not quite right. I don't quite believe you. I think that's, I'm still more on the side of leaning towards this bullshit. Oh, well, that's fine. Whatever is to you. And I really appreciated that and kept me coming back. And I think it built an amazing relationship where we've had some crazy conversations that are really deep and really spiritual and really meaningful over the years. So I knew that I couldn't wait to get her on the podcast and get one of those recorded. And I think we just walked right into that. It just felt like some of those conversations we were having in Instagram DMs just came to life right on the podcast. And I'm so happy to share that with you. I think she's really special. Her art is really amazing. If you want to check out her art, all the pages are linked below. She does some modeling. She does lots of stuff, and she's just an interesting cat that I think you guys could all learn from, and I've learned from tons over the years. So I'm really happy to share that with you guys. If you guys want to check out the sponsor for the podcast, Freshie, please do. They're amazing. They take such good care of me and everybody in Grand Prairie here. Please stop by and say hi to them. If you want to help the podcast out, share an episode, pass it on to a friend, share one of the Instagram stories. That really helps. And other than that, and also I want to say a huge thank you to everybody for the response for the Ashley Severson episode. It's been amazing. So many people have reached out and just said that they either enjoyed it or impacted them, and that means everything to me, and I'm so thankful, and has meant a lot to Ashley as well. I don't want to speak for her, but just we've been texting, and she's feeling a lot of the love too, and that was a very bold, and not bold, but just a very vulnerable thing to put out there into the world. And I'm so glad that she trusted me enough to let this be the format that she did it with. And I'm so glad that it worked out and that she is happy that she made that decision. So I just want to say a big thank you for that. And thank you guys for listening. And yeah, I'm feeling pretty grateful this morning. So just wanted to, this afternoon, I shouldn't say this morning, it's 4:45 right now. I slept half the day after I came back from jiu-jitsu, but man, did it feel good. A little harder to get the naps in when you got a dog climbing all over you 90% of the day. Anyways, I'll let you guys get into this episode. I plan on having a short little intro here, so I didn't add any undue length to the episode, but look at what I'm doing. I'm already 11 minutes in. Oh well. Thank you guys. Enjoy the episode, and I'll see you on the outro. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Denique.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's been a long time coming. I mean, me and you have kind of reconnected. We grew up together in Slave Lake, same grade growing up. We weren't too close at that time. And then I can only say it from my point of view, and you probably see it differently. But I found that once I graduated and kind of got out of Slave Lake and started seeing more of the world and losing some of my I think it was armor that I built up of just certain things that I just kind of brushed right off. Anything woo-woo, anything spiritual, I kind of just really disconnected from. And at that time I was starting to open back up to that. And I feel like I beat up on social media a lot, but some of the positive things was, in seeing your life carry on through social media, I could see that you had a lot of understanding of these things that were so new to me because I had totally shoved them off in a box for so long. And as I was kind of pulling up all these new things that I had to give a new, fresh look to, I had a friend that I reconnected with along the way in yourself that I could kind of bounce these things off of and ask you about. And you were very okay with me not totally diving into them. If I wasn't, I would ask lots of questions. I would, because I was so in a structured mindset that really was preventing me from fully realizing these topics. And you were so good at helping walk me through that and just giving me little pieces along the way. And kind of, it was really fun for me to watch our friendship grow as I opened up to that side of my life so much, and how much our friendship was able to grow off of the conversations that we'd have about these topics, but it almost grew with the base that we grew together of my understanding of it. And that allowed our friendship to grow. And I just thought that was so cool from my side. And it was something that when I started this podcast, we've talked about getting you on for what?
Like since the beginning.
Since the very beginning, right?
Before you had your podcast, I was like, please let me be a guest. I'm really excited. So I'm happy that I got to see, like, now you've done over 100 episodes. That's crazy. That's like, it's really exciting for me to see, like, even though we weren't close in high school, we were very different people at the time. And I've always been like a more private, individual type person. I would kind of like bounce around from friend group to friend group. I wasn't really close to anybody. So for me, getting close to, like, you were friends with a lot of the more athletic people, and I was kind of intimidated by that just because of the way that my family is. We're not very athletic. Well, my brother is, but other than my one brother, I never felt like I really related to that. So I just naturally isolate myself. And I feel like that's where I got a lot of this spiritual understanding, as well as my stepdad is very, very spiritually inclined. And he came into my life around 2008. So we were in junior high. And every day after school, I would go home, and him and I would have these very deep, like, intellectual conversations about life and how do we feel and how we experience it. We would talk about extrasensory perception, love, relationships, anthropology, psychology, like human behavior. Why do people behave that way? I think a lot of it was because, like, my mom isn't Canadian. So I didn't really like when I first started speaking English, my English was all over the place.
What did you
I had
speak
English
first?
words, but it was English. It's just I had Dutch grammar to English words. So
Oh, I see what you're saying.
my sentence structure was backwards for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got kind of ostracized early. And then by the time I moved to Slave Lake, I had already felt kind of like rejected just by society in general. Yeah. So I didn't really reach out to people because I felt misunderstood pretty early in my life.
Yeah.
But as I got to lean more and more into it and spending time alone has actually made me super comfortable with who I am today.
That's exactly what I was going to bring it. That's awesome.
I don't care if I mess up my words. Like a lot of my friends, they are immigrants. They're not from Canada. And I love it. I love the way that they play on the English language because their structure is not the same as like when you're born and raised. Like my dad has been born and raised, but I didn't ever live with my dad. So for me, I didn't get that, like, I didn't even understand the super more Canadian side of my family because I spent so much time with my mom. I just resonated with her more. Mm-hmm. And in 2008, she brought a boyfriend over from Holland and he was really into just how do we work? How are we as humans?
Yeah.
And it was really nice for me to kind of bounce those ideas back and forth with someone who, he also has a very strong accent. So when he was trying to get work in Slave Lake, it was really hard for him to actually connect with anybody in the community because they just didn't understand him. And so him and I would kind of bounce these ideas back and forth, like, how do we connect better to our environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in hearing you say that about, well, so many things, there's so many things I wanted to jump on from what you said there, but a couple of the main things was kind of, when you're talking about like when we're kids and being more in that athletic group and stuff. And it was funny because in preparation for this, I was thinking about that and thinking back to those times and thinking how much I changed over the years, because like when my first friend group was not that athletic group, right? Like, I don't know if this will mean anything, but like kind of, you know, me, Mark LeBlanc, Hayden Zimmer, Evan Crawford, we were all like a very tight group and we loved Legend of Zelda and, you know, playing Nintendo 64 in about grade 2 or 3, just through hockey, because that was the way. I was such a chameleon as a kid that I just, what people told me was, oh, like, you know, Nintendo and all this nerdy stuff, this isn't cool. Hockey is cool. This is good. So I just, oh, well, I can be that, because I loved everything. It's not like I didn't like hockey, but I loved all those other parts. But I think so much of what put me into these friend groups of kind of where I ended up was just nothing about it was so much less me and so much more of the culture that we were in and where I fit into that, and what parts that took away from me. Because what I was thinking about was like how amazing our friendship is, and like the things that our friendship gives, that so many, when I look at the people I know from Slave Lake, our friendship brings aspects of things that I would never get from so many of my other friends. And they're great in all their other ways and they're funny and all this stuff, but there's something missing there. And I feel like for a lot of time I was missing that whole angle. Right. And what was interesting in what you were saying is the time alone, it's a gift and a curse, right? Like nobody wants to be lonely, but if you look at it the right way, it can be a gift, right? Like it allows you to get in touch with yourself and allows you to ask certain questions and do certain things. And I feel like my upbringing of I didn't have any of that. I never sat by myself. I was always entertaining myself.
Most people don't.
Exactly.
A lot of people don't have that. I just used it as my way to cope with my chaotic family. As you know, they would be like, go to your room. And I'd be like, yes, please, I'm going. It was my way of having some space to breathe. And so it became like a survival mode almost.
Right.
And through that survival mode, I got to become very comfortable with the parts of myself that maybe I didn't like early on, you know, and we all have parts of ourselves that we don't like. And there's a difference to being alone and being lonely.
Right.
Like,
very much.
I feel like when you're lonely is when you see those parts of yourself that you don't like and you continue to kind of beat yourself up over those aspects. Where I feel like where you're just alone, you recognize like, oh, those are my flaws, but they kind of make me who I am.
Right. For sure. And I think also just it's either you refuse to address them, or you just keep them in the shadows completely, and you tell yourself some story that covers up for that failing or whatever it is. And usually you still really dislike it in yourself. And usually if you're at that point, you don't even see it in yourself, but you really dislike it in others. And it's your own issues that you see with yourself, but you haven't addressed that. So it really comes out in others. Like, you know what? I'm working on my anger, right? I elbowed a door before getting started because the thing wouldn't work, right? Like my anger, I know it's there, but before
I feel like a lot of people from Slave Lake had anger issues. I totally had them. I just hid them while I was at school by being like cold, numb, kind of closed off. But I would go home and I would scream and I would break things because in front of people, you don't want to show that side of you, especially not your school. You don't want people to think that you're the crazy kid when I was already kind of labeled the weird kid. So I didn't want to be the weird, crazy kid. That was already too much for me I was like, I'm not going to take that on. But when you do sit with yourself, or even not like, you can at some point allow yourself to blow up, to get angry. And then look and be like, okay, why did I get so angry? Why did I get mad?
Yeah, there's answers in there. And I think so many people don't like the answers that are there. So they refuse to ask the questions when they feel these things. And right, well, all that is like, I've talked about this a lot of like that anger, whatever it is, triggers. I hate the word trigger because it's been overused and beat up. But like in that sense of, triggers are gifts. When you start to look at things through the right viewpoint, something that triggers you, makes you really angry, that's a gift. That means, there's work to do there, right? If you ask the right questions, that can really provide you with some answers that you need, right? And
especially jealousy. My favorite trigger has to be jealousy.
Yeah.
Because when you see somebody behaving a specific way and that feeling bubbles up in your stomach and it gets into your chest and you can't speak because you're so upset, but you see something, I actually really believe that when you feel that jealousy, it's because you are actually meant to experience that. Like whatever it is that you see, say you see a happy couple and you feel jealous, like, why can't I feel love? And you should listen to the vocabulary that you use when you're experiencing these really intense emotions.
Right.
And you can kind of look at yourself and realize, well, I'm upset because I know, and in the deeper soul part of myself, that I'm worthy of a love like that, or even greater than that.
Right.
And that negative feeling is because you're telling yourself a lie, and your soul is kind of pulling away and being like, hey, I don't agree with you here. And so I'm going to make you feel a little bit upset, a little bit sick to your stomach to let you know that I'm not in agreement with you.
Yeah.
And then when you feel that like very blissful experience where you feel like, I don't know, you're on top of the world. That's when you're in agreement with your soul, and you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and you're thinking the way that you're supposed to be thinking.
Yeah.
I don't really believe in the idea of should. There's nothing that we should do or nothing that we shouldn't do, like, or life experiencing itself. But if we are to feel jealous, it's because we're meant to experience that.
Oh, hello, kitty. Hello, kitty. Is that the kitten or the kitty?
This is the kitten.
Oh, well, hello. What's his or her name?
Her name is Salsa.
Salsa. I like it. One of my favorite foods. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Sometimes she's sweet and sometimes she's spicy. So.
There you go. Just like salsa. I like the name. I like it even more now. It's funny you brought up jealousy, because that was one of the ones of, I'm going to take it back one more step further and I'll bring up the jealousy. Because just to bring back of that first point I was making was hearing about you taking so many steps forward by again, I like the specification you did about being lonely or being alone, right? But that time alone, the gifts that it gave you and the path that it started you on, and the fact that it started you on that path early, that's a gift and a curse, because the earlier you start it, the less prepared you're going to be, but the further along the journey you get to. Whereas I see a big comparison with myself was when I graduated university, because all through high school, like I said, I was never alone. I never wanted to address these things. I was very much not looking inwards, not wanting to do the work, not sitting with myself. Went to university, partied my ass off for 4 years, had like the best 4 years of my life, but there was a lot of things coming up, jealousy being one of the big ones, and jealousy and my anger, but I didn't want to address them. And I was always finding external reasons and justifications for why it's everybody else's fault but mine. And then when I graduated, I moved back to Slave Lake, and my friend groups has changed a bit. You know, people were into some different things, and I felt very, very much alone. And then I moved to Grand Prairie about 8 months later, and I was really alone. And talking about that same gift and curse thing, that was when I really started my journey. It's tough to say that it's just the fact of being alone, because there were some major things that happened at that point. Was, you know, one, I found marijuana that I think really changed my life and really started making me ask, or not even making me, but just the question. Sometimes questions just come up, even questions you don't want to answer. They just come up and you're forced to address them in that moment, right?
I feel like if you definitely get stoned enough and you're by yourself, there's going to be a thought that pops up where you're like, ooh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can push that one down right now, but I think I need to address this eventually, because this is that's a real question, right? So it was the being alone, finding that, and then finding podcasts all at the same time were kind of these three really game-changing things, where I hear these strong guys like Joe Rogan talking about it's okay to cry, and it's okay to show these other sides, and Aubrey Marcus and all these spiritual teachers and Duncan Trussell, all these guys are just showing this other path that I was so locked away from because of just my viewpoint on it of that's not for men, that's for weak people, that's for
which is actually a horrible curse to society, as
right
so many people put pressure on men. But if you look back at like the history of men, this is something that my stepdad and I covered extensively while I was in high school. I probably should have been having more fun as a teenager, but this is what we talked about. He read a book called The Legacy of Male Depression. And what it talks about basically is, if you look back at the history of men, this is kind of the beginning of the generations where we have longer lives. And that's because we're not sending our men out to war all the time. We're not sacrificing the masculine figures of our families anymore and forcing the women to be at home, because in the long run, it affects both sides. But if we're constantly saying like, I really can't stand hearing people say like, all men are trash, all men are cheaters. Like there's a lot of masculine hate right now, but that's not gonna like help the women becoming stronger. What's going to help women really stand more in their power, be more sovereign with themselves, because let's face it, a lot of women feel like they can't stand up on their own. They can't live by themselves. They can't afford to pay their bills by themselves. They can't raise their families by themselves. They can't follow their dreams because they're supposed to make sacrifices. Men have the other side where it's like almost like their lives didn't matter for so long, that now that they have an opportunity to kind of stretch their wings and become something bigger, it's almost so many generations of them being shoved down. They don't even know where to start. And so it's easy to get, especially if society is saying like men are horrible people, that is just another barrier for men to get around. And I think it's important for us to be helping each other to kind of release these generational burdens that we all carry, different forms of codependency because of what we've gone through as humans. We're, one side is not cleaner than the other side. Men have issues and women have issues, and every like genders in between and outside of that also have issues that were not even, they were those things in the shadows that we just don't look at, that we don't talk about it, we don't pay attention to it.
Right.
But now we have a chance to talk about it. We have a chance to express ourselves, and we're still scared. Even though like on a deeper part of our brain, the reason why we don't do stuff to upset our community is because when we were in tribes, if we were to do anything that our community didn't agree with, we would get kicked out and we would be sent into the forest, which literally meant that we were left to die. And so part of our brain says, you're going to die if you disappoint your parents. You're going to die if you disappoint your friends. You're going to die if you do the thing that you want to do that nobody else says that you can do. And so there's a very real part of our brain that's saying you're gonna die, but we're not going to anymore.
Exactly. but people still have that programming, and it's very much gameable. And you see these people, right? Like right now we're seeing it very much, people are so torn up over the divides that is being created in society right now. But people don't recognize that that's the underlying thing of like, no, I need to say all these things to show that I'm on the right side of this tribe, because the fear that they're ramping up is a very real fear that is very evolutionarily based, right? Like that's what they're tapping into. That's what I have so much problem with, is when you understand it, you can see the games that they're playing. It's like, oh, you're really using these evolutionary, deep-seated truths to the core of human nature for your own needs, right? Good or bad, depending which side you could say this is for the better, this is for the betterment of society, this is for whatever. Take that all away. What I just don't like is you're pulling a trick. It's a trick you're pulling on people, and you're pulling on their heartstrings essentially. And I really don't like that right now. But you're so right that is the underlying strings that they're playing along that is making people feel that way and making them so much blinded to the other side of the object, because they don't want it. There
becomes a justification that goes along with it, where you're like, because the fear is real. The chemical reaction that you're experiencing is extremely real. Yeah. The threats, however, of it actually coming true is not.
That's what they're overplaying to get you scared of it, right? And they keep ramping up that fear of what's going to happen to you, right? And changing and moving goalposts to make sure that people stay in that state of fear, because it's a very powerful position to have people scared. You can do a lot of things. And I feel like that's very unfortunate. And just dialing it back to what we're talking about of how unfortunate it is for men to the demonization of masculinity, how damaging it is to men. I wanted to just make sure we cover on that. I think that is just as damaging to women, because I think what's missing right now, or what is going along, sure, it's, I think, a really tough time for men right now. I think, Jordan Peterson is one of those people that's really trying to create a space for the masculine qualities in that. But what I love about teachers like Aubrey Marcus that really talk about the divine masculinity and divine femininity is, masculinity and femininity is in all of us, right? Everyone on the spectrum.
We carry both, and they have functions.
They have very real functions. Yeah. And when you demonize masculinity, you think it's just an attack on men, but it's very much an attack on women. And what people so many times with things like social justice things, there's always a real true belief of there's some sort of injustice here that doesn't feel right. There's some sort of imbalance, right? And they're not wrong. There is an imbalance, right? Men have probably been too far balanced to the masculine side and are missing some real feminine aspects. And there's so many issues with women, and they're lacking some of the more masculine traits that allow them certain realities of life and certain steps forward that they could really be missing. But instead of trying to say, hey, there's good and bad to both masculinity and femininity, and both need both, and we need a good balance of them, we're just demonizing this whole side. And not only is that holding men back, but that's holding women back from what they really need to reach the next level and to have, equality really reign. We need everyone to see the good in both sides, and to find that within themselves, and to understand that, we both have a masculine side. Yeah. Like that's what I think that's that lack of understanding that we're missing, that's really going to take it to the next step. And I think everyone's fighting a really good fight of, I don't think people are trying to cause harm by, attacking masculinity, and that the heart's in the right place, which I think is so much.
I think what they're trying to do is defend femininity, right. Which is like, I understand and I love it, because I'm a woman and I love to just express my femininity. But there are moments where I need to be masculine. Like my job is, I work in construction. So for me to go to work, I need to be able to make decisive action, and I need to be able to just move and know that I'm making the right move. And there are certain traits where I need to be very clear and direct with my conversations, because I work with artists, and other artists have egos, and there are a lot of men that are in power in my community. There are more women now, but you can see that the women have become almost hyper masculinated because of how hard they had to fight to get into that position in the first place. To get any kind of seniority, you have to almost be the toxic masculinity that is in society for men in order to move up in a career like that. Right. Exactly. And so because the masculine energy around the world is it's not balanced. It doesn't encompass compassion. It doesn't have strength in that form, because sometimes it's actually harder to be soft than it is to be aggressive or overruling. And I can see that the industry that I'm working in is slowly getting better. They're slowly allowing more women to get into the positions of authority, but it really wears them down. You can see specifically that the women are exhausted from having to maintain this really tough exterior, and they're not allowed to show up with that more feminine energy, because it's almost like it voids the voice of the woman in that position. Because it's like, well, if you're in a leadership role, you need to behave a certain way, speak a certain way. And if you have any kind of emotion, it makes you weak all of a sudden. And that's a problem that men have as well, that they're not allowed to show emotion. They're not allowed to cry.
I was gonna bring that up. Yeah.
My family is Dutch and German, and in German, a lot of Alberta is that German, Polish, Ukrainian, kind of French. And there's this understanding where, like, my family used to say, like, are your bones broken? Are you bleeding? Then no. Why are you crying?
Exactly.
Like, if you are not in physical danger, you're not allowed to have emotion. Right.
No, I see the exact same thing. Right. Growing up with, a strong German influence, right? Like both my grandparents on my dad's side, both, escaped Germany in some really tough times, came here with nothing in their pocket and worked really, really hard, and kind of were, I don't know if it's forced, but the realities of the situation required of them to live a certain way, and that passes down. Right. And then you see that. And, I got a secondhand dose of that. Right. So like my parents were very much like that with me, but compared to what they saw, it's nothing, right? Like compared to how this is soft comparatively, right? But you're coming into it too from a different point. But I found that same thing that you just laid out very, very eloquently for why it's such a struggle for women in the workplace at times, to put that persona on. I found the exact same thing, Denique. Like when I was working in that role of, I very much have always known I'm a very sensitive guy. Like I have a very strong touch with my feminine side, with my divine feminine. Like people know this. I think that listen to the podcast now, I've been very forward about this. It wasn't easy for me to be in the position I was with work, of having to be that person and be that strong person, because I always had those sides of, there's times in work where you have to say, you know what, this is the right business decision. Sure, it's not going to be good for people, but that's tough. That's how business works. And I was not able to leave that at the door. It would eat at me. I would take it home. I really struggled with those. And I wanted to have more compassion for the people and find a middle ground between, what capitalism kind of pushes everyone into, of just the bottom dollar, the bottom line. That's what matters. Right. Yeah. And I was very good at that. I could do that. I could put myself, because I am very logical. And I think kind of how I grew up, like I said, of kind of that was what I was breaking down to let my more spiritual side in, was that the logical side. But when you look at things like that, it's really hard to hold that balance and to go home every night and to not feel like you're being torn in two, because like that masculine side is so much on the forefront, but that's not all of who you are. So you're always holding a piece of you back and quieting it down, pushing it down. And it just didn't feel good. It didn't feel right. And that's what I had to realize, was something isn't right here. Like what we talked about at the start of, just, it's hard to put words to it, but something here is not working with me. And it really is eating at me. And like what really matters to me and my value system's true to the core. Yeah. This doesn't line up, and I need to make a change. Right. And I did make that change, and it's been very rewarding in some ways, terrifying in others. It's all over the place. But I think that's important for people to understand that is very real for women, that side of it. But I think it can happen for guys too. And I think, yeah. And I think that just goes.
Both sides are going to experience the heaviness of the masculine burden that has been put onto it. But there's also, like, I think we've become more aware of like what women have been going through for the last few generations. I feel like we've been more vocal. The women are now speaking up more because there's been more of a push for it. But I feel like still men that are in power still say, like, we're not going to address that. And it's still getting pushed aside, where I feel like the women are kind of, they've had enough of being pushed aside, and we're all screaming just to be heard, which is not good either, because at some point it would be nice not just nice, but be humane.
Yeah.
To just see it from both sides.
Right.
And to have that inner balance is super, 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 super important. And I wish more people would look internally and find an inner masculine and an inner feminine, your inner mother feature, your inner father feature. How do you express those things?
Yeah.
Are you taking advantage of the people around you? Are you manipulating situations?
Yeah.
Just becoming aware of whether those roles within yourself are balanced or not, instead of, pointing at somebody else and be like, hey, that guy's not doing it right. Double check yourself and make sure, like, am I doing it right? Am I being who I think the world needs? I think is a really important thing.
Right. And I love what you said there about asking yourself those questions. Like, am I taking advantage of the people around you? Right. Like that was something that I really understood. It's funny that we've already brought up jealousy, because that was one of the things of when I looked back, once I started to kind of ask these types of questions, I looked back at past relationships, and always one of the biggest friction points was my own jealousy. I had tons of jealousy. And it's funny that you brought that up, because what I see, I can only speak for myself, but what jealousy was coming through for myself was complete and utter 100% not believing in myself, self-confidence issues, right? It was all insecurity.
Yeah.
Because
most jealousy actually is insecurity.
99% of it, right?
You tell yourself, I'm not deserving of that. Why would you say that?
Right.
Why would you tell yourself that? Like, you wouldn't say that to your friends.
Exactly.
If your friends are like, hey, I want to start a business, what do you think? You'd be like, dude, I'm right behind you. I'm going to be there for you. But when it comes to yourself, you're like, no, I can't do that. I can't start a business. Why would I put myself at risk? Nobody's going to be there for me. And that internal dialogue is
right.
It's not helping anyone.
But I think that is already spoken from somebody that's already on the journey, because like when I put myself back in that point, I wasn't even having those conversations, right? It was just coming off of like, because I didn't even understand that it was my own insecurity. It would come out of, well, why is an ex-girlfriend going out partying, without me, or whatever it is? You're not even having that, like, oh, am I not worth it? Right. Because that's steps down the road. Once you actually are asking questions of why. I wasn't even at that point. I was so still locked into that externalized. Like, oh, that's her fault. She shouldn't be doing this to me. I don't deserve this. Right. You put it all externally. Nothing comes inside. Right. Like, right.
Once you start blaming other people for it and be like, she's just a horrible person.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Right? Which isn't true, because you love that person, and everything feels bad because it doesn't make sense. You're telling you these stories to make it make sense, but at its core, it doesn't make sense because you're asking the wrong questions. The question you need to be asking is,
because it's not true. Your body literally is responding to you and be like, no, man, that's not true.
Yeah.
I don't like this.
Yeah.
But then you stay in the loop and you make yourself even more nauseous and sick and delusional sometimes. You get you go down this downward spiral, you get lost.
Because that's the only tool right? Is just to go down that spiral. If you don't have any tools to get you off
how to get out of it. We don't know. We're kind of like at the forefront of figuring out how to get our emotions under control.
Yeah.
Like, this is kind of the generation where we're like, hey, maybe we've been doing it wrong. Can we do it a different way?
Yeah.
And it's becoming more socially acceptable to just do it your way instead of doing it the way that everyone expects you to do it. Right. The expectations are slowly getting taken off. I feel like we're pretty lucky here, but other parts of the world, the expectations are still there. You still have to perform and behave a specific way. And you just, like, jealousy is a really huge thing in many, many cultures where they use it against each other. And like, I have a lot of Latin friends, and telenovelas are like the soap operas. They like they live for that, the drama, where the jealousy and the cheating and the attacking and
the spice.
The spice. But it becomes part of the culture where you almost don't even know how to have a healthy relationship. Because this is models. What everybody is saying is normal. It's normal to behave like that, to go and key somebody's car that you think is cheating on you when maybe you don't have any proof.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe they're just busy. Maybe they're taking care of other stuff in their life, and you feel so neglected that you think it has to be another person that they're with, right?
Yeah.
And then you create this snowball effect of drama. And it just keeps going because the person that you create the drama to doesn't know how to deal with that drama, so they create even more, and it just gets passed on. It's like,
or that's the only thing that's comfortable, so they don't even realize it, but they're creating it because that's what makes them feel comfortable. They're probably, oh, I hate, if you ask them, I hate drama, this is the worst, I wouldn't want this. But when you look at the actual
behavior,
the action, the behaviors, right, it's like, no, you brought this all on yourself, and probably deep down you do crave that insecurity, right? And I think so many people, life is tough, and so many people come from a lot of chaos, right? And that's unfortunate, but a lot of times people don't recognize that they bring chaos on themselves because that's what's comfortable, that's what they grew up in. And I think that's one of those questions that everybody could do to ask themselves, like, hey, what did I grow up with, and am I repeating that somehow, right? It might not be chaos, it might be jealousy, it might be, any of those things, whatever you grew up with, you might seek that out, right? Like you always see people dating their.
Usually that's what happens, like whatever you grew up with at home is what you kind of look for externally, especially in a romantic partnership. I can't remember where I heard this from, but it was when you grow up in a household that is chaotic.
Yeah.
It almost becomes so natural that when you don't have chaos in your life, you don't know how to live. You don't know how to respond. And so you go out of your way to find people who bring you that chaos because it almost becomes comfortable for you because you're so used to that experience. You don't know how to live without it. So you find people and places and experiences, and you create this world to recreate your childhood. And people aren't even aware that they're doing it just because that was what they were comfortable with. That's what they know. But honestly, nobody deserves to continue that. People deserve to have some sort of peace in their life.
And what is one of the biggest manifestations of what you just explained there? Addiction, right? Like so many, like not all addiction, right? Everyone's different, but I'd say a good, I would guess up to like 80% of that is just exactly what we talked about, of getting out of that cycle is so foreign to them that it's almost more comfortable just to go back into it. And it's so hard to break that because you have nothing else to model off of. Life is so weird and so scattered that to try and find something that feels as normal, I guess, as you'd call it, as what
but that would be your normal.
That is your normal.
That's what you're used to.
And that's when I work, so hard to break.
I used to work for events during parties, and a lot of the time I was scanning IDs. Not gonna lie, I have definitely partied. There was 4 years also that I had where I was kind of just off my rocker, enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But there was plenty of events that I worked at completely sober, just drinking coffee all night, watching people come weekend after weekend to the same events. I would see them on different substances. I could see them when they were on new substances. And I got to talk to a lot of people. And what I got to see from the hundreds of people that I saw working at this place was that every single person had some form of heartbreak, whether it was betrayal from family, friends, society, often, because it was a safe place for gay people. You got to see people that were completely rejected by entire communities, by their families. And these people have nobody to lean on. And what do they lean on other than the escape that makes them feel kind of okay for a little while?
Whatever that is.
In whatever form. And so for me, what I saw was a lot of heartbroken people that were just covering it up with chemicals. Chemicals that temporarily give you that boost of what you're looking for. You get to flirt with somebody for a night, maybe take them home, and then the guilt and the shame come up for not having what you think you should have or being who you think you should be. And I think that word "should" is very dangerous because you put all these burdens onto somebody that were never ours to create. We didn't create these burdens. Like our parents and their parents and their parents, like we don't even know how far back some of these burdens come from.
Some are thousands of years of society.
We carry them, and sometimes willingly we pack them onto our shoulders and we take them everywhere we go. But some point when you get into the spiritual journey, you kind of realize, like, this is heavy.
Yeah.
I don't want to carry this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to express myself this way. I did feel like I was starting to get addicted when I was partying to MDMA, because as a teenager, you probably saw I was like the little emo kid. I wasn't like, I wasn't all flowery like I am right now. I had a lot of depressive tendencies pretty early. And when I found MDMA, it was that chemical reaction that I all of a sudden didn't feel depressed. Now I'm smiling. I don't have that social anxiety anymore. I'm not worried that I'm going to say the wrong thing to people because I have all these chemicals in my brain and I feel good.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I ever got addicted to it, but I feel like I was on my way to using it as a crutch. And I'm glad that I had found somebody who also wanted to get out of the partying lifestyle. And so me and that person kind of pulled ourselves out of it, and we started doing healing together.
Yeah.
We did kind of lean on wine for a while.
Yeah.
When you take away a vice, another one kind of comes in.
Yeah.
And you kind of got to deal with it as the punches come. But there was a huge thing that I saw between even this person that I spent so much time with. There was heartbreak, and a lot of it was betrayal. It was this feeling of like, I'm not respected. Yeah. And so I don't need to respect myself. And that's why I'm going to put these chemicals in my body that could kill me. I'm well aware that they could kill me. I could die. Yeah. I've seen at events people die, and it is heartbreaking because you know that they were just there to have a good time, try to escape whatever reality it is that they have temporarily. Monday to Friday is hell. I go to work. Friday finally comes. I get to go party my butt off. And you don't want your friends to die when it comes to that situation. But the reality is, like, living in Vancouver, there's been more than enough people that have passed on from overdose. And I've seen some really gorgeous, beautiful souls pass away. But you know that they have this heartache, this pain, that something's missing. They don't feel like they're enough for whatever it is that they want to be enough for. Whether it is your family or whether it's for a romantic relationship or like for a job. You don't feel like you're enough to make more money so that you can live in a safer environment. There's many things that hold us back, and I see it mostly as heartache. And we do carry, like, as a Western society, we don't know how to deal with grief. No. And grief is spiritually carried in the heart. So in the heart chakra is where you carry grief. And if we're not dealing with the grief that we have accumulated from our life and from our parents and our ancestors, it's not been expressed. And when we carry that, it's heavy, and it causes addictions. It causes isolation and just bad behavior because you think like, hey, I feel awful, so I'm going to treat this person awful. But that's not doing justice for anyone and hurting other people. When you get to a certain point in your spiritual journey, you realize, I'm hurting myself when I do this. Like when you lie to other people, you're lying to yourself. Like if you can get away with saying that lie to somebody else, you're still not getting away with it because you're lying to yourself. You're not being authentic to who you really are. And authenticity is kind of everything. It's my favorite word, honestly. I think it's everything. Yes. Like being real to yourself is the medicine that this world needs. Like, as we become more ourselves, we become more expressive and more balanced in our masculine and feminine energy, more trusting in who we are, then it gives the ability for the people around you to become who they want to be. Because until we have that one person in our community, in our group, that is just authentic, fully themselves, and they accept themselves, it gives them permission to express themselves. Exactly. Where previously we've not been allowed to express ourselves.
That's exactly what I found when I started to listen to podcasts, Denique, was I would listen to people like Joe Rogan or all these comedians that were very much authentically themselves, no other piece. And I was just like, what that highlighted was I wasn't that myself, and how much I hated inauthenticity in everybody else. Right. And again, when something really triggers you in other people, that's something that is going on with yourself. And that was one of those things. And that's what I was finding. I'm at work, I'm putting this partial front on of who I am, but I'm not being fully authentic of who I am. Right. Because I'm a pretty goofy, silly guy. Right. And I think more and more it came out as I got more comfortable with him, but you lose.
You've always been pretty like comedic.
Always,
I think
right?
that's one thing that you didn't lose like during high school. I saw that was like just the keystone to who you are.
Well, I appreciate so much that you see that, because that's what I like if I was to ask myself of like, if I wanted to highlight my main shining light that operates everything, it's humor, whatever the funniest things. That's why I love comedy. I love comedians, because they are the most, like essential oil version, like boiled right down of what that humor is, of what animates me. They are that. And that's just and I held that on such a high pedestal of just that humor. But when you're at work, I can't be that normal goofy self, because you lose certain respect, right? Like if I go through at work, when you have employees that are 40 years your senior, have some real questions about whether you can do this job, whether they're going to respect you, it forces you to put on a certain persona to get the respect. And that's fine. And I can do that. But I found that doing that day after day, month after month, then year after year, that putting that on was draining me, right? And just forcing to be that person. I don't mind being that person for a little bit, or if it's for something I care about because it's important. But when it's for somebody else's business that I'm now being inauthentic to who I am for that reason to help this business. And I love that. And I took pride in why I was doing it. But at a certain point, you lose certain pieces of that. And I really found that I was struggling with that. And that just wanting to be completely authentic to who I was so important to me, and became more apparent as I got further along. Like, hey, this really means something to me. And I didn't think it meant this much, but it does. Right. And I need, and sure, this job gives me all these other things, but what it isn't giving me is very important and is of tantamount importance. And I put that at the top, and recognizing that and making the changes that need to come from that was very important to me. And it got me to that place of more happiness. I'm still working toward it. Happiness is a constant journey. You're always working at it, but like, it was such a step forward in that goal that it really makes the decision a lot easier, right? Like I've questioned it every day since I made it, but knowing that and knowing that the how it's lining up inside and how it makes me feel gives me so much more confidence that it was the right decision, and that I'm on the right path, kind of thing. Right. And it's so much of being animated by what's inside versus going along with what everyone's telling you what to do. Because that's what I was doing before, of like, if you would have asked somebody watching from the outside how things are going, oh man, you're doing awesome. You got this crazy job that makes all this money.
You're doing great.
Exactly.
But when it comes to your soul is like, hey, we're missing something. I have a value here that's being completely neglected. Can we take a look at this? And I thought it was super amazing to see you step away from that and really step into like your own personal power with your podcast and diving deep with that. It was really nice to see you grow as a person, and that we got to have those conversations while you were at your other job. Like, why am I feeling so unfulfilled? Because spiritually, you were not feeding into that part of yourself. And the sad thing is that spirituality is considered like woo-woo, and a lot of people push it away because now that's not real. It doesn't make sense. But if you think about it, we breathe and we don't see the air, but we know it's there. And spirituality is kind of the same idea. It's just because we can't see it all the time doesn't mean that we're not experiencing it and that it's not important to our survival as a person, as an individual.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny. I've heard people had the conversation on faith so many times. They talk about that. Like when you have faith all the time and you just don't realize it. Even like the most agnostic atheist person ever has a lot of faith in their life when they really look at it through the right lens, right? When you get in your car, you have faith that the brakes are going to work. You might even not understand that. You're just having faith, right? There's certain things you have faith in all the time, but there's certain people that take it two next steps. And I think for myself, I feel
like if you were to be in the ocean and you start drowning, you're going to have faith that like you want air.
Yeah.
That faith is you're going to push, you're going to think like, oh no, I could die today. But if you were actually put into water and you were actually drowning, you would fight for your life because you believe that you are worth more, that you're not done yet. And you can't take that out. That is that survival. It's there because there is a value to who you are, and you're not done yet. There's so much more for you to experience. And when we're put into something that becomes life or death, that's when we can really experience like, oh no, I'm not depressed. I'm just not fulfilled. And so I understand that there's something else that I need in my life.
Yeah. That I love that framing of the life and death, and that brings it there, because I've had so many conversations, and I'm really not obsessed, but I read a book called, and apologies to people that have heard this a million times, because I talk about it all the time. It's called The Worm at the Core, and it's about terror management theory that articulates that so much of society and human nature is based off of our own comprehension that we're going to die one day. We're the only species on Earth that understands that has that concept, right? And that really fractures our mind to be able to still move forward in life and still accomplish things, and not just cry in a hole one day that terror, that be, paralyzed with fear at our own mortality. We have to compartmentalize it away. And we have these things when you look back in society, Western culture is a little different, and I'll get to that. But if you look at societies for thousands and thousands of years, they all had death ceremonies and different ways of talking about death and bringing that forward to help you manifest that. One of the things with Western culture is this newer culture of we don't talk about death. We hide it from our kids. It's
behind closed doors. And there's so many cultures, and like our ancestors, we would have our hands on the dead body. Like there used to be a point. I read a book called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, and it was a woman who worked at a crematory, and she explains what happens behind closed doors when we do die. Like, what is the process that happens to our body when we get cremated or when we get prepared to be put into a casket? And she talks about, as a Western society, we don't deal with death at all. We kind of leave it up to some people to deal with the dirty work. But in general, we just kind of sweep it under a rug, ignore it, and just don't get put into it. But that creates another problem that comes back to that heart issue of grief. Is we have all this undealt with grief of the family members, the pets, and it bleeds into other forms of grief that we don't know how to express. Like exactly, idols. An idol passes away, we don't know how to grieve. I had a pet pass away in my arms, and for 6 months, I was completely out of it. Like I couldn't function properly. I was totally just not in this world. And that's because I have no idea how to deal with grief. And I'm still learning and processing. I think I cry a lot more now. Yeah. And that kind of allows me to release the physical stress. But there is almost like generations of undealt with grief.
Generations and generations. And I think the manifestations of what that causes is very much blind. Society is very much blind to as well. And that's what I like. So I read that first book, A Worm at the Core, but then I read this book. It's called Don't Think About Death, a memoir on mortality by Gary Lederman. And it is the first book, Worm at the Core, is very much the scientific side of the studies of terror management theory and all the different university studies they ran on. And that is mind blowing because it shows the power that holds. Whereas Gary Lederman has been a sociologist that has studied death and mortality for like 40 years. He's like the leading university professor on death and mortality in the States. And he actually heard him on a podcast that he may have been on Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman. He talked and I'm just saying that because some people, these books are like, I don't know, itching powder to them. If it's a book, I don't want to be around it. I don't read. That is gone from me. But if you don't like it, Gary Lederman also is on podcasts. If you just type in his name in your podcast app, you'll come up and you'll probably get half the information that's in this book just from a conversation that he's having. But what I loved about this one was he really highlights that of all the different cultures. What do other cultures do around death? Right? What can we learn from them? What do we lose by not having it? And it really highlights that. And then he goes through his own story about losing his wife and going to a ceremony in Hawaii, I think, where they let off all the lanterns and just, it was just a beautiful, beautiful book. But what it really highlights is how odd it is, our relationship to death in Western culture, right? Of just all those things you were speaking to, it really highlights that and shows. I feel like we don't think about it. It's not weird to us because that's just how we grew up. That's normal to us, is this.
Yeah, it's part of our programming.
Right. It's part of our program. But then when you read a book like this,
it's out of date, and it's time to get a new upgrade. You know, we don't go without upgrading our devices, but yet we'll go entire lives without upgrading the way that we think. And we're like the coolest supercomputer there is. Why wouldn't we upgrade our own programming?
Yeah. And the way it upgrades it, and I think this is very powerful imagery to think about, the way that it upgrades your software is by showing other cultures and what they do. And the way we look at death in Western culture doesn't seem odd to us. But then when you highlight, you know, like the more Latin festivals that celebrate like the Day of the Dead and stuff, it's like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense. And and these guys have this, and this culture has this, and we just kind of have nothing. It highlights it, right? And I think
I don't know if you've heard about Indonesia, but in Indonesia, they will literally mummify their family members. Everybody has their hands. Everybody's dealing with the dead body. Mm-hmm. And then they'll put clothes on this person. They'll sit them up. They'll put a cigar in their mouth, a hat on their head, and everybody will get drunk with their dead relatives. And they bring them out of the wherever it is that they store them, and they experience life with the dead body as if that ancestor is there. And to us in the Western culture, that's like, ew, like, why would you even touch a dead body? Why would you? But they see it in a completely different light. They see it as, this is how we stay connected to this individual. This is how we remember them. We don't forget who they are because they are part of us.
Yeah. I can do you one crazier than that even.
Please. I love it.
So one of my favorite scientists, her name is Heather Hang. She's been just awesome. Her and her husband, Brett Weinstein, they're just amazing people in so many ways. But she was talking about the field work she did because she's an evolutionary biologist. And for lots of years, she did lots of field work in, Madagascar and all over the place. And I can't remember exactly where it was, but she was talking about this culture where it might have actually been Madagascar, just one side of it. But they have this where once a year, they actually dig up the bodies and the bones of their ancestors and spend a day with them, telling them what's happened that year, that, oh, we had a good harvest and we had this and we had that. And they give them gifts and then they rebury them. And I thought, wow, is that a different, like just so wildly different. But when you think about what that would give them as in that closure and that keeping them in, like, I just thought that was such a cool thing that I'd never heard of before. And it seems.
Well, no, because to us, like, if you think that's like disrespectful to us to dig up your ancestor, like if I was to go to my grandparents' grave and dig them up and then just kind of be like, hey, guess what? And like, that would be so frowned upon. Like I'd probably go to jail for desecrating the grave of my grandparents because the rules around it are just completely different.
Right. And what you said earlier, just, we don't realize how much expectations rule our lives. If you're not on the path of trying to articulate your current truth or whatever it is. I hate the wording I just used for that. It sounded terrible, but whatever that is that animates yourself, that's true to you, right? If you don't do that, you're taking on the expectations and that's what's going to fill that gap. If you're not filling it yourself, society is going to do it for you. And that's what's so interesting of when we talk about, and that's kind of where I want to take it next is growing up in Slave Lake, Alberta, we both know there were certain expectations. We already spoke to some of them of kind of what that did to you and what that did to me and kind of where it pushed us of those expectations. And then my big change was going to university and going not just to university, but to residence, which was very much a complete 180 of expectations and was so jarring and gave my head such a hard shake that it really changed me as a person. Right. And I had a question for you of when you first moved to Vancouver, the expectations there versus Slave Lake are so vastly different. How was that for you? And how do you think that impacted you? Like, did you recognize right away that was a change in you that came along with that?
Huge. The first year, it was really hard because it was almost like a culture shock.
How old were you? Sorry, when you moved there?
I was 19.
19. Yeah, so, that is so young now looking back on it. I felt so old.
Now I'm just like, wow, I really just, I saved up for 2 months. I bought a beater little van. I packed all my clothes and a mattress. And I just drove in December through the mountains with a cat and a snake.
And what kind of snake?
It was a Mexican king snake. So he was black with a shiny silver stomach and a little white goatee. He was pretty cute.
That sounds pretty cute for a snake. I'll give you that. For a snake, though.
Poor Snake. No,
Yeah.
he was very well behaved, actually.
I would hope so.
But it was completely different because I felt in Alberta, I really had to be a specific person, and I hated the person that I was. There was, I realized that this like depression that I was carrying was this inner conflict to who I was. And when I moved out here, all of a sudden I could do my hair however I wanted. And like I was already dyeing my hair colors. I was already getting tattoos. I was always the weird kid, right? So I was always comfortable with being pushed out of a community. But when I came here, people welcomed me in, which was a totally different thing, where I was so used to being pushed that when people were saying like, "Hey, you're cool," I was like, "Wait, are we talking about the same person?"
Yeah.
Because
are you trying to trick me?
I don't have this experience.
Yeah.
It tripped me out for a while.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how insecure I was about who I was when I first got here, until I started talking to people, telling them my story, why I came to Vancouver, things that I experienced. And people were always telling me like, "Hey, you're actually cool. Why are you so hard on yourself? Stop beating yourself up. Like, be a little bit nicer to yourself." And that was the advice that I was given over and over and over, until one day I was like, why am I being mean? Why do I keep doing this?
Yeah. It's so funny to me to hear the story from your words, because to me, it's almost so weird to even hear you talk about being insecure in yourself, because obviously we got to know each other well later on in life, but ever since, you have been so sure of yourself and so true to who you are. And so you, like, of all my friends, you're probably one of the people I would highlight to make that point of what I'm trying to be, of being that confident in who I am and that unique and all those words. Right. But that's what I'm saying, of knowing that it's weird to hear you to talk about before that time, because it's so foreign to me. But it also makes sense on a level, because I knew you in high school, and I got to see all those pieces, and I could very see the visual of the non-confidence yourself. But almost to me, it feels like that's two different people. Like, it's so hard for me.
I feel actually that that there is a version of me that died when I moved to Vancouver.
Very much
and
so.
That scared little girl that was like, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't speak up to anyone. I wouldn't talk to anyone older than me or younger than me. I was so scared is really the only word that I can think of describing myself, that I just didn't feel like there was anywhere for me to be.
There's no space.
Yeah, like I felt like I was constantly being told at home, like, you're too dramatic, you're so emotional, and like, can you just not? And I moved away from my family only to realize, hey, there's literally nothing wrong with me. People love my personality. I'm not too much. I'm not too emotional. I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, I am a little dramatic, and I do accept that. But that's why the Latin people like me, and that's why I like them, is because I love it. I love the expression, and that was actually a huge turning point for me. When I started to learn Spanish, I felt like I had to create a new identity for myself. And I realized that in the beginning, some of the first things that I learned in Spanish was flirting, which was like kind of fun. So I didn't see myself as a very attractive person when I started, but I was getting hit on all the time. And I was like, okay, well, there must be something that I'm missing. Because I don't understand. So I created this personality for myself that was more like confident. When you see these like Latin idols on television, movies, and singers and stuff, and you see how they have this like sexual appeal to them. They all do. You can't deny it. They all have this sexual and energy of confidence to them. And that was the thing that I really admired, the sassiness in the women, where they were just
the spice.
They could just quickly throw a comment out and just get you with it. And when I saw that in people, I felt like, okay, well, in order for me to to bring this out and maybe learn the language, because that's something I heard from someone, is you kind of need to pretend that you're somebody new while you're learning the language. So it was something so small, but instead of being Denique Schaub, I then decided I'm Denique Ali. Like, I'm going to go by my first and middle name and just leave the last name, because I felt like the last name carried too much baggage, too much. It was a different version of myself.
Yeah.
And it's actually gotten to the point in my life where I wouldn't mind changing my name and actually erasing my last name and using my middle name as a last name, because I don't resonate with the version of Denique Schaub anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I never got to meet her. Like
that little girl she's dead. Like, she doesn't exist anymore. And well, now the parts of her that never got nurtured or taken care of, I kind of carry that with me through my day-to-day life. And I feel like part of the confidence that I have is I ask that younger version of myself, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Like,
what do you need?
You know, like, what do you need? And I've always loved yoga. I did gymnastics before I moved to Slave Lake, and I really wish there was like a gymnastics thing there, but there wasn't, so I never got into it. But the stretching later got me into yoga, which was a very similar kind of physical expression.
Yeah. With the very spiritual side as well. Once you get the physical side down enough where you stop thinking about it, the spiritual side kind of rushes in to take its place. It's weird. Yoga is one of those ones where I'm new to the effects of it fully. I always got like the stretching out of it, but I'm just now starting to understand what makes everyone so obsessed with it. Like, seeing past that first level of just the stretching to like the other side of it is amazing.
It opens up another part of yourself. And I when I was younger, I would just kind of lean and bend and twist my body. I would sit cross-legged just kind of for fun, hang upside down in trees. Like, I was almost like a little monkey. And I really held that part of myself back. And then when I got back into yoga, it was about 2009 when I got into yoga, because my neighbor was the owner of the gym. And she was always asking me, like, why are you not doing yoga? You should come just for a little bit and you'll like it. And I was like, I don't know, just trying to resist. And then once I got into it, I got really into it. And because I was already having spiritual conversations at home, it was a huge snowball effect, and I got really deep into it quick. It was hard because nobody else really understood it in our age group. Like, I couldn't talk to friends about it because they were just not willing. But now I have like friends that are literally around the world. I have conversations with them about connecting to spirituality, your body, because connecting to your body is so important. Like, you connect to your spirituality through your body, through your breath work. Something so simple as just watching your breath will bring you back towards your soul. And we don't utilize it enough.
For sure. And what's amazing to me is to see with certain things like that, like with everything in kind of that woo-woo bag, it's tough. It doesn't matter how much value it has. It's just tough to get across the line. But some of these things like breath work has so much value to it that even the least woo-woo of all the people, they see the value in it, right? Like, so many UFC fighters have breathwork coaches now. So many hockey, NHL players, like it's almost the utility of it.
Even CEOs of companies are getting people to do breath work, because they're realizing that when you can get, like, there are different levels of frequency that our brain can go into right now. Because you and I are like conversing, we're going, like, when we're focused on our regular lives, we're in beta. That's kind of like the go-to thing. But when we get into like flow, say, like Delta, when we kind of go off on a tangent and we just kind of like really dive deep into it, that's actually closer to alpha. Or like when you're painting, or when you're playing guitar and singing, making music, you're in alpha. You're in that creative zone,
right?
And that can get access through breath work or through yoga. Oftentimes, meditation, like through like the reason why people get so addicted to running is because it shuts off your mind, and there becomes this spiritual connection to the breath and to the movement of the body. And then you get closer to your soul in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that in so many things. And like, I don't think I recognized what I was finding until I started meditating. And when I started meditating and meditating and breathwork kind of all came into my life at the same time, but you know, they're two sides of the same coin in my opinion, but same thing. I started recognizing like, oh, what I'm getting out of this, I got a little bit of that out of running. Right. And unfortunately, I'm such a obsessive person over, efficiency that every time I run, I always have like a podcast going or music, or I'm always trying to do something at the same time. And that was having me lose kind of some of what was making running special at the start of just like you say, it's shutting yourself off. But with meditating, that was the goal of it, was to get to that point and kind of put that as
well. There's like thousands of ways to meditate.
Right.
And I think there's going to be someone that's listening right now that's going to say like, I can't meditate. I can't turn off my thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's actually not the goal of many different forms of meditation. The goal is literally just to listen to them, to become the third party and just observe the thoughts.
Yeah.
Whatever the thoughts are, let them happen. Experience them, but don't hang on to them. You know, sometimes we'll be like, oh, I forgot to do the dishes. Then don't say like, oh, I don't want to do the dishes. Don't think that. Just be like, okay, I have to do the dishes. Yeah. Okay. And then you allow that to just be like, that is what it is. And you can allow that thought to go. So another one can come in, you can observe it and let it go. A lot of people try so hard to just be like, damn it, I'm thinking now.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to think anything. Yeah. And I remember when I first started meditating, that was my thing, was like, I would meditate and I would catch myself all the time being like, why can't I stop thinking? Yeah, but that wasn't the point of it. The point of it was just to start becoming aware. Yeah. And as you do it more, then what you can start to pay attention to is the space in between your thoughts. Yeah. And in the same way with music, sometimes a song becomes more powerful in the pauses than in the sounds itself. And so when we start to pay attention to our own pauses in the sound, we can connect to that moment of nothingness. And we can start with 1 or 2 seconds and expand into it. And that's kind of the evolution of meditation that can be very helpful. For sure. But a lot of the time people stress themselves out and they say, I can't do it. But that's because they want the no thought experience. Right. When that's not necessary for a good meditation. It's okay if you can only sit for 3 minutes for meditation in the beginning. That's totally fine. Instead of being like, oh, I wanted to do an hour. An hour is hard for literally even somebody who meditates regularly sometimes. I don't meditate for an hour, and I've been meditating since I started yoga back in like 2009. Yeah. Because at the end of the yoga class, there was the meditation. She would kind of walk you through, and I just heard myself thinking, and it drove me nuts, and I would beat myself up over it. And that's not necessary. It's just to become aware of like, what am I paying attention to? Are my thoughts helpful? Like, if the thoughts that I'm having are about some famous family that has literally nothing to do with me, and it's some of that like reality TV, I'm gonna call it garbage because I'm not a fan. Yeah. People get way too hung up on other people's lives before paying attention to their own. And when you become aware of those thoughts, you can kind of look at it externally and be like, what is a better way for me to use my thoughts? What is something that's more beneficial for me to pay attention to? Yeah. Where can I shift my focus?
And it can be good to highlight where you are in life of what things are popular. Like I can tell you what mine is lately is jujitsu. Like I started going at the start of October, and all the time when I do find those quiet moments, I just find my mind's just, running through moves, going through like different things. Like when I'm laying in bed, like when I'm trying to sleep, my mind never shut. Like my mind goes a million miles a minute, like all the time. I think that's why I really liked weed, because it was the first thing I found that it didn't like,
it slows it down a bit.
I want to say that like the effect was, it felt like it was slowing down, but it almost felt like it took away my, all the narratives around it racing, and that's a bad thing, and that's okay. And just to let it race and to let it go on these tangents. And there's no, in the same way of like stopping beating yourself up for thinking when you're trying to meditate, it would stop me from, or just allow me to enjoy the racing and enjoy the tangents that my brain goes down, and just allow me to think of these things and really think deeply on a subject. Like, it's okay to spend 20 minutes thinking about some really esoteric piece of information or some really weird thing, like to just kind of meditate on it and go past those first layers, right? Like
yeah, sometimes that's another frequency that meditation can bring you into is theta. And literally, like, all the best minds that had created something ridiculous and put it into the world as this passion project that we just kind of revel in as a society. I'm trying to think of like a lot of scientists back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. I can't remember who it was, but there was someone that would have a rock in his hand. He would sit in his chair and he would try to fall asleep. And as he would fall asleep, he would let go of the rock. The rock would hit the ground. And just as you're falling asleep, that's where you hit theta. Yeah. Theta is in the sleeping mode. But if the rock would be enough to wake him up, and he would have these brilliant ideas because these ideas come from the subconscious. Yeah. And when he would drop the rock, he would wake himself up, but still be in the theta frequency. So he could write these ideas down and express the inner creative that we don't have access to when we're having conversations like this. Yeah. And I think that's so amazing. That was something I really found when I started to meditate. There'd be times where when I could get to this point, right? Like, there's always thoughts coming in, but in the space between them, either emotions would come up that I didn't know I was feeling. I'm like, oh, like, I'm lonely, or I'm this, or ideas, like you say, these amazing ideas or things that I hadn't thought of, like podcast guest ideas, like just like weird, oh, that'd be a cool sponsorship down the road of like this person. But like, all these ideas that I had no idea where they come from would just pop up in that state. And it was a new task of like learning how to keep in that state where you can remember it after, right? But also not, you get this great idea and it jolts you. You're supposed to be meditating there, and then you get this excitement and to try and bring yourself back down to just let it go and not be attached to these things. That was like another step of my meditation. I had to learn how to, like, the first step was just learning how to get it to that point where there would be space in between those thoughts. And then these things would come up, and sometimes it'd be really exciting. Then I had to learn how to keep myself in there without, it's like riding a balance. It's like trying to fall, be right in between that point of falling asleep and being awake, because they're so antithetical to each other, right? They do not mix well, right? Sleep, wakefulness to sleep is the opposite, right? Sleep to wakefulness is pulling you out of those two realms, and trying to be in the middle there is a weird spot to be, but the fruits and the benefits that's come out of it has been so beneficial to me that I would, it was a skill I had to learn because I was really, really benefiting me in my life. It was very actionable. I feel like as an artist, I try to reach that state. And I feel like I tried to reach that state even as a teenager without knowing that was what I was doing. Yeah. Because, isolation was actually my safe place from my family. And so often I would just have a nap to escape my family. And I would find that in the time that I'd be alone in my room, I would have a nap, I would wake up, and I played guitar in high school, and then I'd have an idea for a song, and then I would start playing, and I would write down the chords and the words to the song or I would have a drawing idea, or I would write poetry. So often I would have a nap, and when I wake up, I would have this poetic idea that I would put onto paper. And I didn't realize that what I was doing was shifting my own vibration. I was changing my own frequency to use it as a creative fuel, which is one of the best ways to do it, is to have a nap and then wake yourself up and use that as a creative outlet. Yeah. Or another kind of in the same way is before, if I can, depending, it's kind of tough sometimes with the podcast, but if I can, before every podcast, I like to meditate for 10, 20 minutes right before we hop on, because it just kind of puts you in that state of just emptying everything out and just being okay. It's also reinvigorating too. It kind of gives you another jolt. It's like having a nap, like it gives you this kind of resets the system. Plus it just puts you in this place of openness to whatever, like going into this, we didn't know where this conversation was going to go. Right. And it could go so many different ways, and kind of And we talk about so many things that we really could go anywhere.
So many places, right? But what I love about meditation is it kind of matches that of like, I know that's what I'm getting into every time, but that state almost matches of like that meditative state is perfectly matched for going into it, being completely open-minded. That's what gets me to that place of being that open to do it. Because maybe sometimes if I didn't, I would, maybe if jujitsu was on my mind all the time, I would just keep bringing this conversation back to jujitsu the whole time because that's where I was. But of just letting all that stuff go and just getting to that open. Now it doesn't matter what comes up. You can kind of play ball with whatever things spring up into existence.
The flexibility that maybe wasn't there before the meditation.
Exactly, and I do that every time, and I find that it really helps. Just facilitate better conversations. I don't know. I love it, and I would even notice that when I was doing it at work, like where I'd go to work for the morning, do all this stuff, and then I'd usually do a 15-minute, 20-minute meditation at one point in the day, and then finish out the rest of the day. And that 20 minutes to an hour right after it, I would usually come out of my meditation, write down a list of all these things I'd do, 4 or 5 things. And then, I would have the rest kind of my afternoon laid out because it'd bring me to that place of these are what I need to do, or this is what seems important, or these are the ideas that came up. It
becomes more clear, like what is important, right? Yeah. Instead of, because there's so much, it's noise. There's so much noise going on with also the expectations where you think that you need to do these things, but then it's like, okay, well, what is actually, when you meditate, you come out of it and then you can sit and be like, what is actually important to me right now? Can I do it today?
Yeah.
And it's like the structure changes and it becomes more like goals instead of dreams, where it's like, oh, well, maybe one day I'll do this. And then I feel like after meditation, it's like, no, I'm going to start this.
Yeah. Or here's the first step to that dream. Like, this is actionable. Yeah. I find it in the same way.
I do have an issue. My phone is going to die. So I'm going to plug it in. And
no worries.
So I'm going to move my lamp and I'm going to change my setup so I can plug my phone in.
Sounds great. Sounds good.
Not really sure how I'm going to set this up, but we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I'm sure we will. 2 pretty smart cats.
Well, 3 if you count me.
That's funny. My little puppy's just having a nap beside me here.
Well, my cat here is asking for dinner too, so maybe I should feed her. And I just want to see how this is. It's a little dark.
It's up to you. It's all good to me.
Well,
I see shadows moving.
I'm trying to move a lamp.
Oh, that's actually a mask on the wall. I thought that was a drawing of a mask. But now that the light moves, I see the depth of it. Cool.
Pardon? Sorry.
The mask on the wall, I thought it was a drawing until you moved the light, and then I could see like the actual like depth of it, and I realized it's actually like it's
I got it when I was in Spain.
Cool. I didn't even know you've ever been to Spain.
I went for the
school trip?
The school trip. Yeah.
No way. I was on that too. That was tons of fun.
Were you?
Hell yeah.
Okay. So we went to Spain together and we didn't even know.
Well, that's perfect. Well, I guess we know what we're talking about. For the next subject is our trip to Spain together that we don't remember. Oh, that's hilarious. And Morocco.
Get my cat some dinner and then I'll be right there.
No worries. I'm just giving my doggy some treats anyway. We should go, girl. Oh, I love that dog. She's so cute. How's that? Don't blind yourself. It doesn't
I
matter.
don't
If it's a
want to
bit
be
dark, it's a
blinded,
bit
but
dark.
my lighting here is pretty awful.
Well, I don't mind.
All right. Well, as long as you don't mind.
Good to go?
Yes, I think.
Ready to
we're good
rumble?
go.
Sounds good. Well, while we were getting your phone plugged in and seeing the light, we both just realized we went on a trip to Spain and Morocco together as a school and didn't even realize, like, now that actually, when you mentioned that, like, I do remember you on that trip. Like but I was just so busy getting in trouble with Lance and Eric that I don't think I had too much time for too much fraternization.
Oh my gosh. To be honest, I basically stuck at Miss Gull's hip that entire trip. I just was like, I'm not leaving you.
Yeah.
So I kind of just stuck to her. I think Sydney and Kate also, they were, and I can't remember who else. Oh no, that trip is kind of a blur, to be honest.
There's a couple points that really stick out. Like, I remember when we first got to Morocco, like walking down those streets for the first time, like how old it was. Like, I remember that very clearly. I remember going to that fabric place where we tried on all the things. I remember going to that.
I actually have a photo on my wall from that.
Yeah. I think me and Lance have a picture on Facebook of us in the full garb, like all dressed up. But the thing I remember the most was, it was one of the, wherever we were in Spain, there was like ocean and beach there, like the one place we were staying.
I think that was Costa del Sol.
I think so. So
that's where I got the mask.
Oh, beautiful. So why I remember that was when we got there, me, Lance, and Eric had this idea that we wanted to drink, right? And we wanted to figure out some way. So we drew straws for who looked the oldest, and I guess I lost or won or whatever it was. So it's like, you got to go in the liquor store and see if you can get us alcohol. So I go in and I buy us 3 Mickeys of vodka. I don't know how old we were.
Actually, there was a couple of us because I also went into the liquor store.
Really?
I bought a bottle of absinthe while I was there.
Nice. You're a bit of, I think we were still a little young on the absinthe. We just thought we'd stick to vodka. We were too old.
And it was a smart idea. The absinthe was nuts.
So we went to like Burger King or whatever, got like a big drink, right? And like, this was young enough in like my drinking journey, because at the start, I still to this day don't really like liquor all that much, but at that time it's really aggressive. So I'd always just like drink a whole bunch of liquor and then just chase it and just like get it over with, right? So I'm like, they both mixed drinks, Lance and Eric, and I just was just chugging it and chasing it with the stuff. Anyways, we all end up on this like rooftop bar area at the top of the hotel or something.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And we're all just kind of sitting out there. I think somebody else on the trip had bought one of those like hookahs or whatever and was trying to get it going. And we just see Miss Gall come walking towards the group with fire in her eyes, like so mad. Right. And she comes walking up. And I thought at first, like, how are they going to know? Like, so me, Lance, and Eric are all pretty drunk at this point, like having fun. I thought she was coming over to give shit for the hookah that they were doing. So I didn't even think we were in that much trouble, but she beelines right up to me, Lance, and Eric. And she's like, we know you've been drinking, like, just admit to it now, and just starts reading us the riot act. And Lance and Eric behind me. So she's talking to me, right? Like, I guess for the group night. And I just played dumb. Like, I had no idea what you're talking about. Like, she's like, if you guys step one more toe of the line, like, you're on the plane home tomorrow, and just came unglued on us. And we're like, holy shit. Like, that was kind of crazy, right? Whatever. Didn't think too much of it. Like, I have no idea how she found out. Maybe someone saw us go into the liquor store, but nothing really came of it.
Something.
Right. But here's what it was. So then next morning comes up, Mr. Carlton comes up to me. He says, hey, Nick, got to apologize for last night. Apparently there's some kids drinking at the bar in the hotel. And they told us, and they came and told the teachers because they thought it was with our group, but there was another school group there. So it wasn't even us. They didn't even know. And he's like, we're so sorry for getting mad at you. Like, we jumped the gun on it. And I was so glad that I played dumb and didn't say shit, because I pretty much got the apology from Mr. Carlton the next day, even though
that's an amazing apology to get.
Right. Yeah. You don't get very many Mr. Carlton apologies back in that day, but like, it was just so minimal. It was so funny, like how they were right and they didn't realize they were right. And if anyone, like, I think if maybe Eric or Lance was the one that she went up to, they might have just caved and just been like, sorry, like, we won't do it again or whatever. But I was just like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I'm sorry. Like, and just turned out that was the best play I could have made, because we got away scot-free in the next day. But good to know that you guys were out there drinking too. So it wasn't just us hooligans.
Well, I didn't drink until I brought it home. Like when we were back in Canada, I drank, but we were behaving. And I remember, actually Ms. Gull was super sweet to us that day.
Yeah.
Because, there was, a parade. There was a parade because it was Easter.
Oh, okay,
and so we could hear it in the streets. And I remember Sydney, Kate, and I were like, oh, Miss Gull, can we please go see? Please, can we go see? And she's like, oh, no, because then we'll have to bring everybody and it's just going to be a big thing. And we said, well, what if it's just us? And so Miss Gull was like, okay, we're going to go. So we actually went to go watch this Easter parade where they had these huge floats, but they had poles on them and people were lifting the floats and walking like 6 steps and putting it down, and then lifting the float again and walking 6 steps and putting it down.
Wow.
And everybody was wearing these outfits that looked like KKK outfits, but they were in white with green hoods or black robes with red hoods. And they explained, Ms. Gull was explaining to me why they did that was because at some point in history, the Muslims had taken over Spain, and the Christians were no longer allowed to celebrate their faith. And so what they did was they had put on these outfits so they could celebrate without anyone knowing who they were. So like if you were a shop owner or something, you wouldn't lose your
life,
your business, your livelihood, because people would literally destroy you because many people, it's normal in history to fake a faith because somebody else came in, took over power and said, you need to believe in this. Many cultures over years of war just caved in and said like, I guess I believe that now because I have to, otherwise I'm going to die. But these people held on to their beliefs and they didn't want to let it go. They were still Christians, but they pretended to be Muslim just to survive as a culture. And so they kept that tradition alive where you're allowed to hide who you are and celebrate what you believe in without your identity getting in the way. And I think that understanding was taken not just to the States, because it was in Canada as well. Actually, the place where I was born was the last community where the KKK was actively present in Canada. Really? Which is, I'm not very proud of that fact, but it is a thing. And they've distorted it in a way that they've taken power and used it against people, where it used to be for them to take their power back, to say like, no, I'm still going to believe what I believe, regardless of what you want from me.
Right. Wow. Yeah. That is, there's so many ways you could take that, right? Like you think of it today of, there's probably a lot of people in this today's society that could really benefit from being able to be truly who they are without all the expectations, adding on all the things that are going on right now. Right. But then you see the other side of the coin where people can take that beautiful thing and kind of, make it perverse with the
use it against other people to hurt people.
Right. And that, I think that just highlights a really important lesson of, tools are tools. It's how you use them, right? Like so much of that I see today, so many people demonize the tools when it's like, no, just bad people. Like, yeah, there's been a lot of bad things done in the name of religion. That doesn't make religion all bad, right? Which is a pitfall I fell into for many years, right? And I think lots of people still do. And it's like, you need to be able to separate that out and to be able to understand the tools from the wielders, right? And these things, and we can't just totally give up on things because throwing the babies out with the bathwater, which I think we do a lot of the time. And it's interesting to look at it through the religious lens, because I think that's just one of those ones that's so highlighted and has changed so much over the last, I don't know, 20, 50 years to where it was. Like when you look at
very recently, even.
Yeah, it was thousands of years where that was just this huge pillar of every society. It didn't matter what it was.
We'd kill someone if they didn't believe what we believed, and that was normal.
Yeah, right. And then in the last 20, 50 years, it's almost you're opening up attack vectors for yourself by being openly religious, right? Like it's become taboo. You can make fun of somebody for believing in God, right? Like that. And I think it's changing now. It's starting to rebound, but for a long time, that was, there's not a lot of people you can take a free kick at these days, right? Like, which is a
No.
good thing. You don't want that. You don't want to,
No, and I think now,
demonized.
like with comedy, a lot of it is like we don't kick people while they're down anymore. Right now, I feel like what's happening is we're kicking people that are up to knock them off their pedestals,
Right.
or we're taking something that is obviously wrong and we're making a joke about it just to remind you like how uncomfortable you feel is how wrong the situation is, and we're bringing it up just to remind you that this isn't okay.
Yeah.
And yet we're still making this okay, and by being able to joke about it, we can kind of bring conversation up and kind of debate about it, make it a little bit more easy to converse.
For sure. And that's the important role that comedy serves. And I think people often say like, oh, comedy's changing, all this. Comedy never changes. Comedy is innate to us, and comedy is something that is evolutionary built, right? Comedy doesn't change. What is funny is funny. That's what it is. Like there's societal expectations. Sometimes you laugh at shit that you really shouldn't have. I'm very guilty of this. Sometimes things are just funny and it shouldn't be funny, but that's why it's funny, right? And that's a very important role. And I think I'm glad to see people fighting back about it, but I think people were misreading that and attributing hate and ignorance to comedy in a sense like that. Oh, you're trying to hurt people with this. It's like, no, the goal of comedy is only to make you laugh, right? Done well. You could have somebody that just like anybody else can try and step into that to cause hate. And that's their role is to step in there trying to use the tool of comedy to do that. But when comedy's done right, you're just trying to make somebody laugh. There's no ill intentions. There's no hate behind it.
Literally, the easiest way to do it is to make someone uncomfortable.
Right. And that's just the realities of what comedy is. And I think so many people try and look at, oh, is comedy this, is comedy that? And comedy, to try and put words to it or trying to, paint a picture of what comedy is, or it's one of those ineffable things that you just have to understand. And in trying to do it, like, what's that expression? Trying to dissect a joke is like trying to dissect a frog, right? Like as soon as you do it, it's dead, right? Like if you try and dissect what makes a joke funny, it loses all funny, right? Like that's the point of it. And I feel like so many people get so used to being able to fight back about anything that makes them uncomfortable in today's society, right? With trigger warnings, with all this stuff of just, you get used to this world where nothing offends because it's not allowed. I'm not allowed to be offended, right? Like I can shut away and make everything safe away from that. And then there's this one thing, comedy, that, oh, well, that makes me uncomfortable. That makes me feel this way. I want to do the same thing I do in the rest of the world to isolate away. But it's like, but the comedy is the one thing you only make it funnier by attacking it, unfortunately, right? And that's just the understanding of it. You just kind of push forward. And obviously societal norms push. There's jokes that were funny in the 80s. You can watch specials that are less funny now because we moved.
Oh yeah. Like if you watch back movies now.
Oh yeah. Right.
And you kind of listen to the humor. Some of it's like, oh, I can't believe we thought that was okay.
Right. But at the time, but that doesn't take away how funny that is in the moment. And you can't demonize it, right? Like when you look at, like old Austin Powers movies or old, Ace Ventura and stuff like that. Sure, there's things that society we have moved forward from, but to try and demonize them or to
demonize them now kind of removes the purpose that they had then. Because at the time that was new. And that was not something that people were willing to do until it was done the first time.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And you attribute today's expectations on 40 years ago's joke, right? Like that is, you're attributing today's hate to their jokes, right? Like there was no hate then. That wasn't understood of what that is, right? And it's better understand this movie.
It wasn't intended as hate. Right. It was just to make people laugh.
Exactly. And that's what I see so much of, like, intention. To me, intentions are everything, right? Like what it comes out and kind of I was kind of hoping to get to this point earlier when you were talking about finding a new or feeling a new persona come over you as you're learning a new language. I thought that was interesting because, like, and what you're talking about of, people that have English as a second language and how they communicate intent using their understanding of the language and their syntax and that, but you can understand it and you know what they're trying to say, right? Just because it isn't perfect within the parameters of what we expected perfect English to be, but that all matters zero, right? Like I have a real tough time with grammar and all that and wasting time because I'm a very intelligent person. I know grammar, I know how to spelling, I know all that stuff. And I know, but I don't use it. I just type how I want to type. As long as the communication gets across. And when people get hung up with like, oh, you don't use enough periods, I'm like, really, did you understand what I was trying to convey? Like,
Yeah.
I have so much
Like,
more important.
Did you get the essence of the point?
Exactly.
Because that's where we're going.
Right. Like it's like words and language is already, 60%. Like you're only, if you are the most articulate, well-spoken person in the entire world, right? You're Barack Obama. You are still only converting about 60% of what you're trying to say just because of the restrictions of language, right? If you're kind of a poor speaker, maybe you're only getting 20%, but you have to understand that no matter how good you are, you're only conveying a little bit, and that getting hung up on the words or the language or trigger words or any of that, that is all just, that is nothing. It's the intent.
The micromanaging that you miss the point.
You miss the point. It's all about the intent. And I feel like that's the same thing with these jokes of like, you're attributing your own intent to it. You can't attribute your own, what you think the intent of this joke was. The intent has to be coming from the person that is, you can't attribute your own intent to other people's actions, right? Like that is where we go wrong with this in so many places of just, and it goes back to that kind of message of just being okay with who you are and letting other people find out who they are and not concerning yourself with other people's things, right? Because you're just going to ask for harm, right? You're going to ask to be hurt. If you try and add intent on afterwards for all these things, you're just going to be creating a world where you're hurting your own feelings, right? Like you're creating something that's offending.
Because then you're trying to control the responses of other people, and you have zero control over how somebody is going to respond to anything, whether it's a joke or a serious statement.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very true. Yeah, I just find it so interesting how much power we give to language, and I shouldn't say that because language is power, right? And there's a million examples of it.
In a way, I can say that as my grammar got better, I was able to really tell people what I meant in the way that I meant it versus the way that I was only able to express it. And then it was like, it just kind of was muddy water. Like nobody really saw what was going on and didn't really get it. So language is like a keystone. And I found that when I was learning Spanish, I lived with a girl who was from Venezuela, and she kept bringing Mexicans that didn't speak English over to my house. Yeah. And I had no idea what they were saying. And I would kind of eavesdrop in the conversation. And then I would ask her and be like, are you guys talking about this? And she was like, no. No. And so I got really fed up with the fact that I had no idea what these people were talking about in my home. I might as well learn something. Yeah. So I started to learn the language and see how actually the Spanish structure is similar to French structure. So the 5 years of French class were not wasted. Yeah. Even though I can't speak French to save my life.
Me neither.
But it helps me understand like how the sentence for Spanish would fit together. And as I was talking to someone that didn't speak English, it became more apparent to me that intent is actually very the clearness to get the point across. And I started speaking to people that didn't speak my language. And as I was teaching them English, my English got better. Yeah. Yeah. Because I started to explain things that I never really thought about. They'd be like, well, why would you use this word instead of that one? Yeah. Like for them, they would say tengo hambre, which is I have hunger, instead of I am hunger. You wouldn't say yo estoy hambre. That's like you wouldn't use that phrasing of I am hungry versus I have hunger. So I got to explain like why we would use these phrases or this word, what it would mean, and it became kind of like a game to be like, oh, can I make this clear for this person? Can I get them to understand where I'm coming from, even though there is what seems to be a huge barrier between the two of us, that we can't speak the same language. And there was a guy, Jorge or Georgie, and he slept on my couch for a month. So for an entire month, he didn't speak any English. By the end of the month, he was asking questions like, how are you? Have you eaten yet? And we were having like little conversations, and he got more comfortable. And I got to do that with a couple different individuals. And it was kind of beautiful to see these people really grasp English. And I got so frustrated with myself, started beating up myself and be like, why can't I learn Spanish? I couldn't learn French. I couldn't learn Dutch because my parents had an argument that my dad couldn't understand me when I was speaking Dutch as a kid. So my mom just stopped teaching it. She would still speak to me in Dutch.
Right.
I would understand the feeling of the phrase, but I couldn't translate it back to you. And that's kind of where I got with Spanish for a long time. And I feel like even now I still kind of get that. I go off the feeling of the conversation.
Yeah.
Before I have like the literal translation of what is going on.
Yeah. That's so interesting to me is what I'm thinking about, or what was highlighted to me of what you're talking about when you're thinking about the different structures of language and like how they use like just those small differences of like, I am hungry versus I have hunger, right? Like that is both small and ginormous in the difference, right? Like it shows the power of like, what the two things I want people to understand about language is how it is so important because words have so much power and how you structure them and the things you say, words are spells, right? And they when you say something aloud into the world, it brings something into the world. You need to have the respect for that and the understanding of that. And at the same time, understand that when you take it to the very end though, is intent is what matters, right? And if you get too hung up on the words, is like words mean everything and also nothing at the same time. It's such a hard thing for people. It's such a hard thing for me to try and convey, but I think it's very important. Right? Is that at the end of the day,
well, life in general is kind of like that, you know, like literally everything in life is important, but at the same time, it's not.
Very true. Very true. Right. Like, and that's, and that's what I've like, what words are trying to take, like what words are the role that words play failingly, like they're never going to get their 100%. Words are never going to be able to convey intent 100%, right? Like we already talked about. No. So there
are parts of you that like inside your head you could be thinking and feeling, but then when you go to express it, it's kind of like gets cut off.
Yeah, you're only getting a certain percentage.
Yeah, like it never really comes out entirely clear. There's always some sort of filter put on the words.
Yeah, and but then kind of in taking my own point out earlier of like, it all doesn't matter. You can kind of speak how you want to speak, but that's not true either. You almost need to be operating within this boundary of like, you have to understand how important it is, but also understand that at the end of the day, like you're never going to be able to get there. So you can't just concentrate everything on making sure all the words are all encompassing and don't offend anybody and don't do all that. Like that is, as long as your intent, as long as you're not trying to create hate, if you get caught up on the words, that is a detriment. But if you slow yourself down or only speak when it's the perfect words to perfectly convey, like that was what, when I started this podcast in my head, I thought of like, oh, I have all these ideas and all these things that I believe in that I really want to convey that I thought would be so much easier, but almost I can talk about the same subject, like that terror management theory that we talked about earlier. That's come up in the podcast 30, 40 times, right? And each time I take a swing at conveying why that's so important to me and what effect that has. And I get maybe 1% each time, but in my head, I always thought like when I would fantasize about having a podcast, I just thought in my head, in a perfect world, the first time that comes up, I am going to completely, utterly just destroy that topic and just completely articulate it perfectly so everybody understands that. But that is so far from reality. But in your head, the understanding and the feeling I have of, and all the passion that I have for that subject is all there. But it's a very different role to try and bring that out into the world, right? And that's the skill I'm trying to get better at, is how do I get better with my mouth to make what's up here come out to everybody else, but in the way I want it to. And I feel like that's why it's hard for me to, when people ask me how the podcast is going, it's hard to answer because it's going great. Like on paper.
Well, also you're so closely attached to it that it becomes hard to be like the critic of your own art, if you will. Like people ask me all the time, like, how are your projects going? And I have so many projects on the go that it's like, I just stress myself out when I think about it. I'm like, well, the thing is, I haven't really done anything. And that's not true. Right. I do a little bit of work all the time. My job is a creative outlet. Like, it's not that I'm not doing anything, but when you're so close to something like your passion projects, it becomes really hard to be authentic and clear about the reality of where it is. Mm-hmm. And it's important to have other people to kind of pull you out of it and be like, hey, you know, you're doing actually a really good job.
For sure. Yeah. And I think the worse you are at seeing that yourself, the more important it is to have those people in your life that can help slow you down, spin you around for a second, just say, hey, look behind you, look at what you did. You know, like, I know you're going to be keeping on. As soon as you turn back around, you're going to be running off a million miles a minute, but just for this second, just turn around, take a look at what you did. And I'm very thankful for those people in my life that has done that.
Well, I can notice from the very first, because I definitely listened to the first couple podcasts and then I kind of fell off because I was like, there's so much.
Yeah, but, so many. I totally get
but
that.
I can hear a difference in the way that you're speaking, even like you have more pauses, your allocution is actually more clear versus like, you were so excited and you can feel it in the early podcast where you're just like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm doing the thing. Yeah. And so the excitement was like running through your voice. Yeah. And I can feel now like the way that you're talking, you do have like fast spurts, but overall there is like a more like concise element to the way that you're speaking versus the very beginning of the project, which I think is actually really nice to see.
And I first of all, I appreciate that. And that really means a lot to me that you notice that, because that's one of those things where I hope that that's coming across, but you never really know unless somebody tells you. But I think that change is exactly what I talked about earlier. Like what had brought that change on was understanding that I know I want to convey everything, whatever subject comes up, I'm going to have so much passion for it. I want to articulate just perfectly, but just after doing, I don't know, 10, 20 podcasts where every subject you fail miserably at, just to be okay with, I'm going to convey about 1% of what I want to say on this subject. And that's okay. Because you know what? Tomorrow there's going to be another podcast or 4 podcasts from it might come up again. And I'm going to add another layer to that. I'm going to, do a little bit of more work on that painting that is terror management theory, right? Like my masterpiece of articulating why that's important and why I think that's going to change the world. It just little by little, each podcast that it comes up on, I'm just adding one more layer, one more color, one more little piece to it. Right. And eventually when you look back at the entire catalog of podcast 1 to podcast, 6,000 or however many I end up doing, when you look at those subjects along that timeline, they're going to paint some really beautiful pictures. Right. And to have faith in that and not get so caught up in trying to, as soon as, I'm working on the terror management picture right now, I need to get as much down on this, right? And that's what I was doing those first.
Yeah, like as like a lot of times, like especially as an artist, people like once you become like an established artist, you kind of put the pressure on yourself, and you don't allow yourself to make mistakes at a certain point, which is wrong. Wrong. Like we should be able to just sit down and sketch, make something that doesn't have an emotional attachment to it, but you're still practicing, you're still moving closer or deeper into the subject matter so that you can refine your tools. If anything, you're like sharpening the blade for the next time that you're going in for it. Right. It doesn't need to be perfect every single time, because as we're making the mistakes, as we're learning and we're fucking up, we allow ourselves to learn how we would rather do it. And one of my favorite people, Abraham Hicks or Esther Hicks, she talks about like, when you know what you don't want, you're more clear on what it is that you do want. Right. So it's important for us to experience life in many different ways, or to make a sketch or to make a bad episode. Yeah. And to allow ourselves to have that. Because once we do it, then it's like, okay, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that again. And you become closer and more clear on the image of what it is that you do want. Right. Because sometimes we don't even know what we want. We're like, well, I kind of want, I don't know, like a successful business, a house, a loving relationship. There's some basics that everybody kind of wants that not everybody wants, but just an idea. But when we don't allow ourselves to fail, we can't get a clear picture on what it is that we want. And the best way to do it is to do it. Yeah. You're not going to get the experience of like, we can read as many books as we want, for example, on relationships. Yeah. Literally the best way to learn how to have a good relationship is to be in one. Right. Yeah. But you can read all the books you want. As soon as you get into a relationship, you're in the test. Yeah. There is no like making it perfect. No relationship is perfect. And when you try to make it perfect, you end up suffocating the other person and sometimes yourself along with it.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some sort of release on the outcome of the situation so that it can flow naturally, whether it is a relationship or a passion project or what a career, whichever form of connection it is that you're creating, there needs to be a release on what is to come or how it is supposed to be so that it can be what it was meant to be.
Right. You can't putting expectations on it is going to add more noise to the system that doesn't need to be there, right? Like with a relationship, if your expectations are perfection in every way, you're asking for unhappiness, right? Because no one is ever going to be that 100% perfection, right? That's just not how life works. But if that's your expectations, you're asking yourself to be hurt, right? You're asking for, suffering in your life a little bit.
Yeah. And especially like it's not fair to the other person if you expect them to be perfect all the time either, because then that person is likely going to get really angry at you at some point because they've been holding themselves together for you. Yeah. And then when they snap, they're going to snap on you because they're doing it for your comfort and not for their own. And that's why there needs to be some grace when it comes to failure and some forgiveness. Like the truth is, none of us know what we're doing. We're taught as kids, like, hey, our parents know what's going on. We adults know what's going on. And every year that I become more of an adult, I don't really think I am. But the more that I become aware that none of these people know what they're doing. I have a coworker that I become very close to this year, and he's 63. And the age gap is hilarious. And we're always bantering and bickering at work. And my boss is like, you guys sound like an old married couple. But when it comes down to us bouncing ideas back and forth, we give each other the grace of like we can have heated conversations where because he calls me a phenomenologist because I love the phenomenon side of life, the spirituality, the woo-woo stuff. He's more of like a realist, but he's a phenomenal artist. So he is also phenomenal in some way. He just doesn't want to accept it. So we get really heated in these conversations, but there is a level of respect between us that we can physically feel the boundaries between us as we're approaching them in the conversation. And when we become empathic enough to our partners, our friends, our family, our coworkers, a random person on the street or somebody in another country that believes nothing that you believe, when we open up that empathy within ourselves, we can have those heated conversations. We can have those deep understandings with each other, because then we can become aware of like, hey, that's too far, and we can pull back on our own stance in the conversation when we become aware that the next step is attacking the person that you're trying to communicate your idea to. Right. Sometimes you're not going to get your idea across. Sometimes you can't change the mind of another person because that's just not where they're at in their journey. I found it really hard being on my spiritual journey because I couldn't explain what I was going through, and I didn't have other people to connect with to say like, this is what I'm experiencing. Like I just found out in 2020 that there are ascension symptoms, and ascension symptoms are stuff that feel very physical. It feels like stomach aches, headaches, dizzy spells, nausea, random shaking. All of a sudden you start crying, sleeping too much, not insomnia, not sleeping at all. All of a sudden you have this wave of anxiety that hits you, and you kind of hit like a panic attack. They all feel, these experiences are very real, but if you don't have a person to communicate with and say like, while I'm looking at the parts of myself that I don't like, I'm experiencing these physical symptoms.
And what are, sorry, just to make sure, because those are physical symptoms that you're feeling by getting to a place in your journey
and having, and not
Very
being able to
truly.
communicate.
What it is it's a physical purge of the emotions and the energy, the stress that has been there is a lovely book called The Body Keeps the Score. And what it talks about is that every traumatic experience you've had in your life, every fight with a friend, because, you know, when friendships fall apart, those almost hurt more than when romantic relationships end. Those are some of my worst physical anxiety comes from friendships that ended up in failure, not from relationships, but from friends that I thought that were really meant to stay in my life. And then there was some sort of betrayal, and I felt that I couldn't keep that person in my life because I could no longer trust them.
Yeah.
But that betrayal,
that's a different type of grief. Yeah.
It stays in your body, and we don't deal with that grief either. That's another form of like losing friends, losing a job, or say there's an event. There's some, say, especially for the beginning of COVID is a really good example where we all had these expectations for our year and we lost all of our expectations. All of a sudden, we all had to sit back and just grieve the fact that we were going to travel, we were going to do this with our business, with our family, with our home. Like, there were so many things that we had intended to do that were no longer options in our lives. And many of us, our lives were turned completely upside down. For example, I basically went through a divorce through that. And so my expectations of at the beginning of the year having a happy, healthy, loving relationship became very painfully clear that that was not going to be an option. And I had kind of inklings of that it wasn't going to work before. But once that all fell into place and the world froze for a moment, I had the chance to kind of reconcile with myself, like, oh, I'm not going to have a family with this person. And I thought I was maybe going to start building a family with this person. And so I had to grieve the potential future that I was now losing. And I think many of us in 2020, so many people were drinking away that grief because like I said, we don't know how to deal with it. And so we just kind of numb ourselves to the experience. And I'm not going to lie, I did drink in 2020 to kind of
everybody
numb
did.
it away. But as I kind of accepted it and realized, no, it's time for me to go on my journey my way, and allowed myself to grieve it properly. It doesn't bother me anymore. I don't think like it was a loss. I think that it was actually a blessing in disguise, because there were parts of me that were not happy, and I was definitely pretending for other people to be happy, because on paper it looked like I had something really good. Like we had a business together, we had a vehicle, we bought a house, we traveled together, we got a pet together, we saw each other every day, we seemed to be making okay money. And it seemed like something that from the outside, people would be like, that's a successful relationship. But on the inside, my soul was saying, hey, some of your values are not being met. And this isn't okay.
And how was that manifesting?
It would manifest as fights, to be entirely honest, because I felt like I wasn't heard. And so I was constantly yelling, and I'm not really like, I don't like yelling. I try my best not to yell at people, but I found with this individual, I was fighting with him like my life depended on it. And it got to the point where we were so mean to each other that I was like, this is not okay. We can't be in the heat of it. Like, I don't want to be in the heat of like, fighting is normal and you can experience it, and it's important to be able to express that with your partner. But when it comes to the point where you're picking on each other just to get your point across, like, well, you're so ugly that I don't even know why I'm with you to deal with this. When it gets to that kind of a level and you start really beating at the other person's soft spots, the sore, bruised pieces. And when you know someone like that, you know those buttons and you press them. And I got to the point where I said, these buttons I want these to be a no-go. I want whoever it is to respect these boundaries for me, and I don't feel like this is being respected. I wasn't really making art, and for me, that was my big thing. I remember being in high school saying in art class, talking to a few different girls, we're like, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" I was like, "I'm going to be an artist."
Yeah.
And they're like, "You can't do that." And they just kind of laughed at me. I'm like, "What are you going to do?" Like, "Well, you can't make money as an artist. You're going to starve. You're going to be that starving artist. You're never going to do anything with your life." And kind of went from there. And I still use that as the fire in my stomach to go to work every day, to fight for the knowledge, because technically right now I'm getting paid to learn stuff instead of paying to go to art school, which is something that I never even dreamt of. I thought I was going to have to fork over a bunch of money to go to art school just to learn the skills that I have. That was not necessary for my path, and I don't think it was supposed to be.
Could even be detrimental to your path too.
I have run into quite a few people that went to art school that are just drained. The inspiration is completely wiped out. And both my mom and my stepdad went to art school, and they did tell me, don't do it, because the teachers at art school are failed artists. And for me, that was hard to hear, because I really wanted to get into school. I got rejected by Emily Carr, and I cried. I was so heartbroken, because I was like, I wanted to be that artist that went to art school. But now I'm literally working in an environment where technically my work doesn't matter. It's very large arts and crafts, and everything goes in the garbage in the end, which is really like hard to accept.
Yeah, I would imagine that'd be tough.
Heart and soul into some of these pieces that we create, just to know that it's going to get thrown out. Not going to lie, there are a couple little things from work that I try to salvage and take home, because I'm like, I'm going to take this with me. Like I have a little sign that's an arrow that says fortune teller on it, and I had to take it home because I was just like, that's for me. But I try not to, because I'll just end up hoarding little bits of all the sets that
your whole apartment will
on.
be full of it. And
awesome. Lots of people in my industry, they do that. They salvage pieces of the leftover stuff, because it's just going in the garbage anyway. But I work with these very talented artists that went to art school. Some of them went to multiple art schools across the globe. And I get to work with them side by side. And they have to show me the techniques, because that's what my boss tells them. You have to show this person how to do it, because I've gotten really lucky. Not all the bosses in the film industry for paints are nice people, but the people that I've got to work with have really catered to my strengths, and they've seen that I'm passionate about this and that I will put my heart into it. And so they see there's some of the older generation doesn't like to share the tips and the tricks and stuff. They're like, you figure it out on your own. And then there's other people that are like, hey, come over here. Let me make your life easier. We're going to use this technique to get this done. And there are so many techniques where I look at them and I'm like, I never would have learned this in art school. I never would have learned this type of thinking on my own. The only way for me to understand, like, we mix chemicals and we mix different products together because it has a specific outcome that I would never use if I was painting somebody's house or building a house. Those are techniques that you wouldn't put into a house because it's not sustainable. But if you're doing it for something as temporary as a TV or movie set, it works perfect. Like, I would not think to put caulking and drywall mud together to create some sort of concoction just because you want it hard, but then you also want it to be flexible. The thought process behind that was always almost like revolutionary for me, because what it allows me to do is I can come home to my own art and I can now step out of the box, where I feel like if I would have went to art school, I would have been given a box to sit in and be like, this is where you need to be. There are many artists that just have one style. That's all they express.
Yeah.
And I'm learning through my career that that's not necessary to be a successful artist.
Mm-hmm.
I can have multiple streams of expression and still be successful and still be able to pay my bills. I can't say too many people my age live alone in Vancouver.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's expensive. Yeah. And I wonder most of the time how I pay my bills. Like how do I live?
I've wondered, and I've actually asked you that a couple times over the years. How do you do it? Yeah.
Like how are you managing to pay for your, like, I just realized that as an artist, I need space to paint. Mm-hmm. If I don't have space to paint, I'm a cranky person. Yeah. I'm not at my best. I need a Snickers or something.
Yeah.
I cannot be my more authentic self, because that part of myself, my creative expression, has been halted. Mm-hmm. And I found that living with other people often prevents me from living in my creative expression, because I will leave a piece of art out so that when I'm living, I can walk past it and analyze it and kind of have it in the back of my mind and think, where am I going to take this next? What's my next move? Where am I going? But if I live with someone, I have to pack it up, put it away. Yeah. And then that creative process can get stunted for months or years.
Right.
And then I don't get back into my thought process. And then many pieces don't get completed because I'm trying to cater to the person that I'm living with to make them comfortable. But then I'm slowly losing part of my soul.
Yeah.
So at some point I realized I need to make this work, whether it's expensive or not. If I move in with someone else, I have to pay for 2 rooms. So if I live alone, I don't have to pay for 2 rooms. I have one space. It's for me. And I'm just going to make it work.
Yeah.
At some point, the risk to be alone was not as steep as the risk to be with somebody else.
Right. Yeah. And that's so much is in line with what I've been going through just lately. And that's something that I had on my list of questions for you, was to ask you about the life of an artist and the artist's life, because that was something that I found when I found podcasts and I started to listen to comedians mostly, but also other people, but people that live outside of the box, right? You don't have to be an artist per se to live an artist's life. But what they were really highlighting was so many of these comedians talking about, like, I was never destined to work a 9 to 5. I was always that little bit weird. I was always outside that box a little bit. And that spoke to me so deeply, but I was so far entrenched into that world that they were talking about running from. I was just getting deeper and deeper. And that's what started to bring that feeling and that tightness in my chest of, oh no, like I'm with these people. I'm, like, I think if you've never done stand-up comedy, to call yourself a comic is absolute crazy talk, because it's one of the hardest things you can do. And it's just an insult to it. But like, I feel like a comic inside. Like, I feel like I don't fit in this normal society box of just, I question everything. I'm weird. I dance all the time. I sing all the time. Like, I'm not destined to do what those people did. But I'm also new to this artist life. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to self-start or like self-motivate to keep myself busy, because I'm so used to now being in a, like my job that I had before, it was so ever moving and there was so much momentum that you're almost just putting out fires as they come up, and you're forced into momentum. You need to be forced into action, because if you stop, you're getting bulldozed over, because so many things are going to keep moving if you stop. Right now, I've made it to now everything stopped and nothing moves forward unless I move forward. And that is such a different dynamic that it's really given my head a twist. And I know it feels right. And it feels like this is just new to me and I just need to learn how to live in this space. But I was curious to ask you, because it sounds like that's something that you realized a lot sooner than me and started to.
I think I learned it a lot sooner than, for example, if I was just to take our graduation class, I think I was already doing it before I moved out of my parents' house.
Yeah.
I think the lifestyle that I had decided so soon that I wanted to be an artist that I allowed myself to just lean into it. And the more somebody told me, you can't do it, the more I was like, fuck you. I'm doing it.
Yeah. Watch me.
You can't stop me.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that I won't survive as an artist when that is who I am at a core. And artist doesn't mean that you need to paint or draw, like, or make music, or like, artists can be literally the fact that you're creating something with intention.
Yeah.
That is the whole point of an artist. So there's a phrase that's called art can be anything and not anything can be art. So the point is that you could make something that is an art, but the point that makes it art is the intention. So what you put of yourself into it is what creates the art.
Yeah.
It's you creating your own rules as well, which is something I kind of get a lot of flack for it, especially from my family. They don't understand me. My mom and my younger brother are very good. They allow me to be myself, and they've always allowed me. There was always that leeway, which is why I wore the crazy makeup and my hair was like a rat's nest at school, or like safety pins in my pants. I can't even remember all the weird stuff that I wore. But I know, like, one day I would wear like a cute dress with no makeup, and then the next day it would be like all black with dark blue eyeliner and chunky earrings. And I would bounce around because I was allowed to have self-expression at home. I was trying to find who I was. Because my family is split and we didn't have a whole lot of money. Often I got clothes from my stepsister, who was older, and she was more like, I really don't like this word, but I'm going to say preppy, just to get the point across, like Hollister, Roxy, Billabong.
I know exactly what you're saying.
It was all like pink and branded, and I did not relate to it. There was some part of me that was like, I'm physically uncomfortable wearing this. But that was the only clothes that I had. And when my mom said that it was okay for me to cut my shirts up with scissors, and I could start dipping them in dye, and I could start changing my hair, and just doing weird stuff with my makeup.
Just
like,
freedom.
I would go really crazy, just complete freedom. And my mom said, like, yeah, you can go to school like that if you want. Like, if you really want to, go ahead. And I feel like as an artist, what it is also very connected to meditation and spirituality, as you are now unlearning all the pieces of yourself that you no longer are. And to
no
be
longer
an
serve
artist,
you.
to release those things so that you can be more of yourself. It's like you take these boundaries down. And because I like to make my own rules, my family often gets mad at me, being like, you can't act like that. You can't treat us like that. But if they, like, they're very passive aggressive sometimes, which also I feel like comes with German family. And they would gaslight me to make me feel like what I was doing was wrong, that how I was expressing myself was incorrect, and standing up for myself and saying, no, that's not how I see it, because I know that the way that I view the world is not the same lens that everyone else has. I've always had a little bit of a different perspective than most people. And I became very aware of that early on in my life, just because I just didn't feel like I fit into my family. And I saw that my family didn't understand me. I understood them. I knew where they were coming from. I could relate to their pain and their suffering and their frustrations and anger and resentment. I could relate to it. But when it came to my own shadows, my family never understood it. And they started to put labels on me like, she's dramatic, she's problematic, she's got a drug addiction. They would talk many horrible things about me, probably still are, because they're not happy with me at the moment. I didn't go to my sister's and my older brother's wedding this year just because of everything that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Shadow work can get really heavy, especially when it comes to childhood trauma. And
for sure.
Honestly, Grand Prairie triggers me. I go to Grand Prairie and I leave feeling worse.
Yeah.
And it's not like, I just feel like the way that I think doesn't resonate with the people that are there to a degree that I no longer feel safe. And when I don't feel safe, I start acting out and I start doing weird stuff because I'm trying to protect myself and my ego flared up. And I was dealing with so many other things that were coming up emotionally that I just couldn't handle going back and staying. It was also very expensive. And the only way for me to go was to buy a plane ticket, which to me felt like if I'm going to spend $800 on a plane ticket, I'm getting out of Canada. And the other side was I didn't want to drive 15 hours by myself.
Very fair.
To get drunk for a night, be hungover for a day, and then drive back 15 hours by myself.
Yeah.
And my family just didn't recognize that those were valuable ways for me to feel. What they wanted to do was they wanted to pay for my flight so that I was obligated to stay and experience. Like, I haven't been drinking this year. I made a conscious decision. Like, I've had maybe 20 drinks the entire year. So it would be for like at dinner, I'd have a drink. And it would only be if I was out with someone.
Yeah.
I've not been drinking this year by myself, which has been kind of part of my artistic expression this year, to see if I can kind of get deeper into myself without needing alcohol. Because I used it as a crutch to be more social with people for a long time, that I kind of allowed it to open myself up and talk to people because of alcohol. But now I'm at a point where I just feel sick when I drink and I don't want to. And I knew that if I was to go to these weddings, it would almost be forced upon me to get drunk. And while I don't mind having a drink or two and having like that nice buzzing feeling, I don't want to get drunk anymore. And I know that I wouldn't be respected in that environment. And so I made a conscious decision for myself to not go. However, my family didn't see it this way.
Yeah.
And they're all very, very upset with me. And they're probably going to be pissed off when they find out that I'm going to Japan. But I don't care. And that's the whole point of being an artist and living by your own rules. Is if your cup is empty, you have nothing to give to anyone else because you have nothing for yourself. Yeah. Like if you have a plate of food, you want to make sure that you eat first before you feed somebody else. Because if you can't sustain yourself off of your own environment, you have nothing to give anybody else. And everyone that's not fair to yourself. It's not fair to other people. In the end, everyone goes hungry. And while I didn't want to ruin my connection to my family or my connection to my sister, I'm way more loyal to myself. Yeah. And that has always pissed my family off because I have always been loyal. I only have 2 words tattooed on my body. And the 2 words are endlessly faithful. And that is for the art. That is the essence of art, that I can't give up on this journey. Yeah. There have been many times where I've let people into my life, whether it be friends or romantic. And in order for me to feel like I was fulfilling my role in that connection, I would lose my inspiration and my connection to art to satisfy the connection. Yeah. And I'm at a point in my life now where art is my career. Like I get paid to make art. I get paid. I joke that
how cool is that?
I get paid to make messes. Yeah. Like one of the best days at work, we had a metal wall. It was for like a prison or something. And my boss gives me a sledgehammer and he's like, throw the hammer at the wall. I need you to make some dents. My coworker was playing classical music. So we had classical music playing in the background and I'm swinging this hammer and throwing it at this wall to make dents. I have knives, I'm scraping it. Nowhere else am I going to be paid to destroy a metal wall just because of aesthetics.
Yeah. And the way you get to express yourself in doing it too, like that's what's available to you by sticking to that path and by having faith that puts you in that position to be able to express yourself in that way, in all these different ways. It's going to be different every day you go there, but you're still expressing yourself.
Yeah. Like every day, I never know what I'm walking into.
Yeah.
Because as the movies progress, as the TV shows progress, pieces of it fall apart and pieces of it fall together. And so sets will get torn down and then we'll build up new ones. And you never really know what's going on. Like, I don't get the script. Okay, for this show, I get the scripts, but usually I don't get scripts, and I actually don't read them because I don't have time. I'm literally too tired by the end of the day to read it. And my boss tells me what I need to do anyway. So I just I go with that. But it's a loyalty to myself and my expression. And if I feel like the situation now is going to bring me down, it's going to prevent me from being my authentic self, I'm not going to move forward with it. I'm not going to push myself to make that other person feel happy and comfortable, to make myself feel miserable.
Right. Yeah. And that, it's funny because when I wanted to ask you about like the artist's life, I wanted to ask that question because I'm looking for guidance, right? I'm looking for things to help, but I thought our situations are so different. I don't know how much it'll match up, like how much I'll get out of it, but just in asking that, and I didn't even ask it in the form of a question, really. I just you just took it and ran with it. And I was able to take so much from that. I just wanted to stop quickly and just say thank you, because I feel like so much of your story and just how honestly you conveyed it highlighted so many things that are not 100% what I'm going through, but close enough that it really gave me value in.
Well, I'm going to guess there's probably a little bit of backlash in your family of them being like, you left that job to do this?
Yes. And it's
Are you crazy?
But I wish it was that articulate, because that's what it feels for sure. But that's not
how they're saying it.
And I'm sure it's not how it's, and I'm sure that's not their intent either, right? Like I'm sure their intent is, I'm really worried about, I love you so much and I just want you to be safe and I want you to be secure, right? That's exactly, but how it feels is exactly what you just said, right? Like, are you crazy? And it's not even family, it's friends. It's almost, and I feel guilty about it too, because I feel like it bugs me for the wrong reasons. I feel like, sure, that is hurtful. And I get that that's going to be hurtful, but I feel like the reason it hurts me is because I believe in myself so much and I see out into the future of what this is going to be one day. And it hurts my feelings that other people don't see it too. And I feel like that is my ego.
Ooh, I feel that. I think that's what made me so angry in high school when those girls said, you'll never make it.
Yeah.
Is because I could see it. I could see the life of me being an artist. I could imagine like where I'm at today was my dream while we were in high school. Yeah. That was like me having a nice vehicle, living by myself, having a cat. Now I've got two, so I got double the cat. Yeah. Space for me to create at my deepest desires, whatever it is that I want to create, have the materials, have the funds to be able to afford to buy the materials. Yeah. And a view. Like I have a gorgeous view from my apartment. You sure do, yeah. I like almost convinced myself that I was not deserving of a view, which is something that, like, as an artist, it's like, well, no, I have to get this other stuff first before I can get this, the luxury stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe I don't have like a wash machine in my apartment and other things. Like I don't have the renovated suite, but I chose the view over the renovated suite. Yeah. Matches better with your values. It really comes down to like, what do you want as an individual? Stop worrying about what other people want from you. What other people want from you is their own projection, and they should focus on what they want in their lives. Like when you can, it's going to become clear who's there for you while you're on this path and who's there to either take from you while you're on it. Some people, you just got to let them take it and leave. that is something that I've experienced multiple times, where people show up, they just kind of steal your energy, your vibe, your inspiration. They run off with it and they do their own thing. But what could be a really beautiful thing is you could inspire someone to make their own podcast.
That's exactly what I hope happens with this, right? Or not even that they start like that. That would be great. That would be top.
But that they start on their own passion project. Maybe they quit that job and actually go for the thing that they want. Maybe they start school so that they can be the person they want to be.
Or even just listen to a podcast, or even maybe of all the podcasts that changed my life and put me onto this path, maybe they start listening to one of those and maybe it changes their life like it changed mine, right? Like,
yes,
I hope to one day get to the point where I am as articulate and as moving as those people that moved me to become this, right? Like that is what I'm after. And until I get to that point,
that's kind of where we go as artists, is we all have those individuals that inspire us, our idols, and we want to be seen in the same light. And I think
exactly
that's the path that we're going down. As an artist, it is really hard because it's kind of, if you think about it, there's a lot of these paths that have been created that are kind of tried and true. You know that if you become a doctor, you're going to have a career, stuff like that. But as an artist, it's kind of like you're in the jungle and the path has not been created yet. So you're going to get smacked in the face with limbs and bugs and fall into puddles. And you're going to make all these mistakes because nobody else has made the path. But once you create that path, what you are allowing is for other people to walk behind you. Or you give them the permission to start their own, which is both equally just as beautiful.
And that's the biggest thing of that. That's what I needed more than anything was permission. I couldn't give myself permission that I want to start this. I've apologies to anyone listening, because I've talked about this a million times already, but every day I would go run at the track that was just, like 100 yards from my office. It was just there's a sportsplex complex and I have a little running track, and I'd run around it every day at work. And I would just fantasize about all these cockamamie schemes that would get me some sort of notoriety or initial jump, and I could start a podcast from that, right? Like I'd stop a bank robbery, or I would, just run into Joe Rogan on the street and we get talking, he had me on the spot, whatever it was. I would just always fantasize about this because I couldn't give myself permission to just try do it, just buy it. And that's all it took, was getting to that point where I just had to have that realization of like, hey, you can do this. You deserve this. Just try it. It's okay if you fail. It's okay if
you're worthy. You're enough. You don't have to prove to yourself that you're enough, because you are.
But that process, like, and I think I was already at the point where I knew that, but for some reason, intellectually knowing something and experientially believing it and feeling it is two different things. And I feel like it just needed to cross that line. And as soon as it did, and I've told people this, the second that crossed in my mind, the second it went from like whatever that permission was to, I think you can do this. Within an hour, I had started ordering equipment. Like there was no tournament from this absolute second that switched to, oh no, I'm trying this. There was no looking back, and I haven't looked back since. It's been like
literally the hardest part is the first step.
Exactly.
Just starting it.
And that's why I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't know any of the hosting. I didn't know any of the editing, anything that I've learned since then. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that I needed this desk and I needed some microphones. So I just ordered that because I knew that's step one. And now I'm into it. Now I'm financially into it. I've set the expectations of this is where I'm going. Right. And that was very important to me to do it that way, because I think it's such a scary venture that if I hadn't, there would have been so many times where I could just, conveniently, pull the shoot on an idea or pretend, lie to myself and say, oh, that didn't actually mean that. Maybe in the future, if it works out, I'll start it then. Like there's so many ways you can back yourself out of it because it is such a scary venture, but that's why it's important just to dive in.
It's so easy to, like, it took me 3 years to get into the film industry because I had convinced myself that I was not worthy enough to go in.
Wow.
And then when I got in, I was like, why are these people working here? This is not the place for these people. There are certain individuals that I've worked with where I thought, this is not where they should be.
Yeah.
They're literally just here for the money. They're not here for the same reason that I'm here. And it confused me because I have really strong beliefs. I don't know if you've noticed that yet, but when it comes to work that I do, I believe that like your name is your virtue. Your name is very, very important to who you are. And the work that you create is an expression of your name. And so for me, literally, even just being brand new to the film industry, everything that I made, I wanted it to be perfect because I thought like my name is attached to this. If this goes wrong, somebody's going to say my name and I'm going to be the one that's going to have to deal with it.
Right.
That was dead terrifying for me in the very beginning. And then as I got to understand that it's large arts and crafts and it all gets thrown away in the end.
Yeah.
The seriousness of it kind of, it's pulled back now versus at the very beginning. There are moments where you have to get it perfect because this is somebody else's vision. This is their dream. Right. This is how they want to portray this. And it's my job to facilitate somebody else's dream, which is how I allow myself space to actually to put my heart and soul into it without the blood and the tears.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, right? Like you're still taking it serious enough, but you're not putting your soul, too much of your soul inside so that when it gets thrown out, your soul's getting thrown out too, right? Like
it's enough so that if somebody says, hey, Denique worked on that I get the recognition that I need, but it's also enough that if someone say, hey, Denique ruined that I'm not torn up at the end of the day. That I have that emotional space that I've made for myself where it's okay to make that mistake. And it gets heavy. Like when you work with a bunch of artists, there are a lot of egos in the room.
I bet.
You gotta be able to understand that when to pull back and when it has nothing to do with you and it has everything to do with the pressure and the time restraints that we have as an industry. Yeah.
But that's good that you're already understanding that and not letting it catch you up in that wave and drag you along with it, that you can understand and divorce yourself from that a little bit, at least enough to see it, right? Like, I think that's very important. And I want to ask a very difficult question that is going to go down a really long route, but I think it's going to kind of take us out of the art stuff. So just before we do, if people wanted to check out your art, if they wanted to buy your art, if they wanted to go along your kind of art journey with you, what's the best way? Like what's your art page called? Like how would they follow along the best way?
The best way to find me is on Instagram at curious.inkling, which is my main public journal. That's where I express poetry pieces that I'm working on, just kind of where I'm at with life. But if you're interested in my actual art creations, it's on Instagram as well at Denique Alley Art.
Right.
And that's where I would be selling my pieces, where I could be in contact, where I could make custom pieces or murals, whichever. I have so many forms of art that I don't want to limit myself. So well, that's where I showcase my pieces. And there's no external factors there. It's just art on the Denique Alley Art page.
Beautiful. And I will link both of those handles when the episode releases and everything. I just want to make sure that we got to it so that it was somewhere within this podcast it lives. So the question I want to ask, and I feel like I got to couch this question because I feel like what I said earlier about some of these big passionate things that I really want to talk about on the podcast, but like every podcast I know, I'm only going to be able to add one little layer about it. And I feel like in asking this question, I'm almost setting you up to fail because you will never be able to answer this question. Okay. So like, having said that, so don't put your whole heart into it if you don't want to. But one of the things I've struggled with the most is my own spirituality, trying to articulate it, of what do I believe in? And I have so many metaphors and so many things and so many ways to try and give that little 1% picture of this ineffable thing I'm trying to believe in. But I love hearing other people try and articulate theirs. And I would love to hear from you. What do you believe in? Like, what is your spirituality? I know that this is an impossible question to ask, but
that's a great question.
Is there any ways or any metaphors that you like to use that help you to explain to others some of those true things that we were talking about, kind of the whole thing that articulate your value system and what you truly believe at, like the core, like what animates, what is that underpinnings of the strings that connect all this stuff together that we see in the world?
There are a lot of different avenues that I can go down to answer
I
this
bet
question.
you. That's why I wanted to make
Sure.
sure. That's why I wanted to end that, because I figured this is probably the last question. This one could go a long time, but let's give it its freedom to just see where it goes.
The first thing that popped into my mind was actually a Buddhist quote. When I got into spirituality, I started looking into Buddhism because my mom was atheist, my dad is Roman Catholic, and my stepdad is pagan, I guess is a way we could call it.
Yeah.
There's not really a term that we can describe it other than he learned Druid traditions through someone who learned Druid traditions. In a sense, it's kind of like a shamanic spiritual understanding. And so he opened my eyes to that. And I started looking into different religious texts to find the similarities between them, because I was frustrated that I couldn't also express to people what my spirituality or my beliefs were. So I started to see like, there's got to be some core element between the teachings of these religions that is the essence of it all. For me, the essence of spirituality is the understanding of love and compassion.
Yes.
But a huge element, because the first thing that popped in my mind is actually from the book Siddhartha, which is about a man in India that goes to meet the Buddha. And so this is a really beautiful story. At one point in the story, he sits by a river and he works on a boat, and he comes to the understanding that no drop that he sees in the river has he ever seen twice. And once he's gathered that understanding that every single second that you live in this life is gone the moment that you've experienced it, that there is no second chances. No matter how much you want to say there is a second chance, there's not, because every chance is that moment's only chance to be created. And it can only be created like that way, at that specific time, in that specific place. It's always evolving, and you're always going to lose the moment.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some form of detachment with spirituality when it comes to living life. There are ways that we can live in fear when it comes to the idea that the moment is already lost. And so we make ourselves so busy that we can't stop. And in some ways, it's really beautiful because we push ourselves to follow our dreams, to try that new thing, to take that risk, because we know that there might not be another chance to start. And so we take opportunities more easily when you're deeper into the spirituality, because you understand that it is a fleeting moment.
Yeah.
But then there's also the part where you can kind of surrender and understand, like, the river flows by itself. You can just go along with the ride. You don't have to constantly be controlling the outcomes of everything that is happening.
And when you try, that's usually where suffering arises, when you try and control it.
Yeah, so I listened to something recently from Esther Hicks, and she talks about how in society, what we've done is, say we've got these kayaks and we're trying to paddle upstream because we're trying to create an outcome. So we have this, we're on the river, we're on it. And instead of letting go of the oar and going down the river naturally, what we do is we've created better boats, better paddles, competitions to see who can stay up the longest,
row the
who can
hardest,
paddle the hardest, who can row the hardest, who can resist the flow of life the most.
Yeah.
And it's become this part of the rat race where the real lesson is in the surrendering to the flow. And as we take those paddles out of the water and we just sit in our boat to experience the way that the river flows, now you can take the time, because you're exerting all your energy. How long can you keep it up? Where you're pushing yourself over and over and over continuously to be a specific way, where as you allow yourself to go down the river, you now have a moment to look around and appreciate where you are. You can now breathe, you can rest, you're not exhausted. You can take it as it is. you can see up ahead, hey, there's a bank up ahead. I'm going to pull over and take a rest on the side here for a bit. I'm going to be here and just be.
Yeah.
We're human beings. We're not human doings. And we need to be more aware that it's okay to just be. Sometimes we need to release the expectations. We need to surrender. Surrender is a huge, it's way harder than it sounds, because it's so prevalent around us, where everybody is fighting. Everybody is fighting for something, where what most people just need is to be heard. And as we can be the examples to surrender, to give in, as I continue to give into my self-expression and my own spirituality, because sometimes I don't do yoga in the steps that maybe somebody else would tell you to do yoga. Sometimes I'm moving my body in ways that are not specific yoga moves, but my body feels like it's happy to do it. And it wants to do that movement. And there becomes a freedom once you've surrendered the expectations, because now the rules have been taken off and you can just kind of go with it and experience it, because life is to be experienced. It's to feel it through yourself. And find ways to express it in other ways. Like, there needs to be some sort of expression, whether you find it in art or music or books or whatever expression it is important to release it. But sometimes just sitting there, just being in it. Like, say next time you go to a house party and you are with all these people, have a moment to just sit and just look at everyone. Just kind of pull yourself back and appreciate, like, hey, I'm here. Or next time you've accomplished a really big goal, celebrate it. Surrender to the fact that you've done the thing that you have been fighting for. And there are some things that we need to still fight for. And it's part of that moderation, the masculine, the feminine, the light and the dark, the hard and the soft. There needs to be some sort of balance between those energies. And as we become more balanced ourselves, we can give the permission for other people to find that balance. And when we go off, we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to like, another thing, I bring up Esther Hicks a lot, but she was a really great teacher. And she was the whole reason why the book The Secret was created. Was actually Rhonda Byron stole the information from Esther Hicks, but that's neither here or there. Because I'm an artist, because that's my easiest way to express my spirituality. That for me, that's how I can channel my understanding of life into a physical form for other people to see.
I totally get that. And I think that's so many, I feel like that's so many artists are great examples of what at its base, kind of what you're trying to articulate about what spirituality is to you. It's such a good example, because it is just about expressing whatever that is inside you, that truth, whatever you want to call it, that we've kind of danced around this whole conversation. It's just about expressing that in some way. And that can be in sport, right? Like I said, I've been obsessed with jujitsu. You see people express artistry on the mats.
And that is a sport. It is an art as well. The way that you move your body is an art. The way that you dress your body is an art. The way that you speak to somebody is an art. These are all, like, art is the intention, and then the intention is the spirituality behind it.
I absolutely love how you started that. I'm not creeped out by it, but like how funny it is, the way I framed that question to you. If I would have framed that question the same way to myself, where I would have started was so eerily similar to how you started it. It was weird. Like, one of the biggest things I always talk about, of one of the biggest realizations I had, was I had religion in this box of what it was. And again, apologies, I talk about this a lot, but what was highlighted to me by people like Aubrey Marcus and Duncan Trussell and Pete Holmes was, there's such a demonization of what religion is, because there's certain actors that take the structure and use it for their own wills, and suffering and evil can pop out of that. But when you take it away from any individual articulation of the idea, and you take the idea as a whole, and you back it up, right? Like you take Christianity, you take Buddhism, you take all this, you just look at it on a whole. There's certain common threads between them all.
Yeah.
And that was something that I really loved, was just taking that, and it's love and compassion. That's the other thing, that the amount of times, probably if you took like the mean of all the words I've used in the podcast in the first 100 and whatever, 7 or 8 episodes, love and compassion are probably the things that come up the most, because I fully believe that is that animate. Like if you had to put it to a couple words, that is the
message. That is the message of life, is finding ways. It's so easy to be angry, to be rude, to be disgusting. It's so easy, but to be loving,
that
to be compassionate takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work. It's unbelievably rewarding.
And that's what tells me that's what's at the base of everything. Like that's the underpinnings, is because that love and compassion is so difficult and so intrinsically perfectly rewarding in a way that nothing else will hit you the way that well-articulated love and compassion will. That is what's true, right? There's no denying that, right? And I just love that.
All the different prophets of the different religions, the individuals who are being praised in these stories are people who found ways to express that love and compassion. And I do get confused when these people who worship these ideals, these books, these characters. I don't mean to demean them in any way, but to me, they are stories and morals and characters. Yeah. And what it is they're guidelines into how to express yourself. And I always kind of had the idea, hypothetically, say Jesus was a real person. I'm not saying that he wasn't, just saying we're going to go with this. Yeah. If you're worshiping this individual, would you not try to be more like that person in the characteristics that you are worshiping in your own personal everyday life versus gossiping and ridiculing and judging on other people versus hating and hurting other people? I do find it rather confusing for me seeing individuals worshiping somebody who was the representation of love and compassion and treating other people with the absolute opposite. Right. I do think that they're in a different part of their spiritual journey, and it's very hard for them to see it from my perspective because they're just not there. It's kind of like Pandora's box. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And they're just not there yet, maybe. Right. And I totally get what you're saying, but to me, I feel like I understand it completely, because the difference between with somebody that is like what you're seeing in that something that isn't lining up there, like this person that is supposedly espousing Christian values and is supposed to be this good Christian is not living up to that because they're not following the letter of the law. The difference there is they are following one specific religion, right? Like there's so much dogma that gets and it branches, right? It gets very, very complex quickly.
Whereas we are just looking at the underpinnings of like the essence of Christianity is what we're speaking to, right? Which is the same. The essence of Christianity is the essence of Buddhism, is the essence of every religion. The essence comes down to that love and compassion, right? Yeah. The dogma and the structures built around trying to promote and espouse all those things pulls you further away from the essence of it, right? And that's what it is. People get so caught up in the dogma of their religion, and then it becomes, because if you now, whereas what we're talking about is the essence and not tying yourself to Buddhism or any of those names, because now you have no attachment to it. Now you're just loving the essence of it. But as soon as you have that attachment, everybody else is wrong, right? If you are a true Christian and you have your best friend is a Buddhist, you are going to cause them suffering by trying to convert them out of nothing but love, because you want them to be saved and you want them to live eternally and you want all these good things for them. Yeah. But it all comes down to the attachment to the dogma and to the system around it, not to the actual true essence of it. And that was my biggest realization that brought me back around from, growing up as a kid in a Christian household or whatever you want to call it, right? And just having it not line up with me. This doesn't seem right. The people aren't actually enacting what they're saying they're supposed to be. This doesn't seem right. I'm just going to push this all off. And then to come to that realization where, no, if you just don't tie yourself to any one specific religion, you just take the kind of common threads between them all. That's really what they're trying to articulate. And if you live that way, so much is brought to you.
There's more freedom to the spirituality. Yeah. I have heard from somebody that said like, she's a very serious Christian. I work with her, or I have worked with her. And she told me that she cannot do yoga because it's part of somebody else's belief system. And she believes that because she doesn't believe in that religious system, that she cannot perform that. Wow. And for me, that felt like such a hard barrier to put up for yourself. Yeah. And it almost feels like you're unpurposely limiting your worldview because you're preventing yourself from understanding someone else's spiritual understanding. And while I don't like to put a box on my own spiritual understanding, I want to understand what other people believe in. It's actually a really big value for me to understand where is this person coming from? What is the root of their belief system? And how can I understand it better and have more empathy for what, like, I really don't like the word sympathy because I feel like there's a bit of hate and pain along with sympathy, but empathy is the real compassion for that person believing in what they want to believe. And while I found like it was kind of ridiculous that she would refuse something that could be very beneficial for her body, I realized I just have to respect that is how she sees the world. And she's well aware that my beliefs do not match up with hers. And she's done a beautiful job of respecting me and my beliefs and allowing me to actually speak about the way that I see the world through my own spiritual lens. And maybe we don't see it through the same way, but allowing that person to believe it and not seeing it as a personal attack on your own life because somebody doesn't believe in what you believe in is the first step in us fixing these detrimental wars because religion has caused the most wars. And even though we're like saying, no, it's money now, religion was the basis of war for thousands of years because of belief systems. And it is a very beautiful thing that I can work with somebody who is so seriously Christian that she refuses to ever try yoga. That she still has the space for me to express my understanding, and that I can talk about the other side and seeing dead people, and she can just kind of uncomfortably listen, but she still allows me the space to be who I am, because I do feel like I live in between this world and the dream world as an artist to live who I am at my purest form.
And what you guys are essentially doing for each other is that common thread between all those religions, just giving each other that love and compassion and giving that space to live your own life and to not hold any of your expectation on them, and just to meet them with love and to meet them with compassion, right? Like that's what everyone can be doing. And if everybody did that,
I don't expect her to believe in what I believe in, and she doesn't expect me to believe in what she believes in. But there is the respect that we don't believe the same thing, and we're just not going to go there in a conversation. That we know that there is a boundary there. We're not on the same page, so we're not going to highlight it every time we get to the subject.
Right. But what I love about that is that there's still a relationship there. And what I see so much in the world right now is people have this understanding that if you're not exactly my tribe, if you espouse anything that's differentiated, I can't even talk to you. You're the enemy, and it closes things down. Right. What I love to hear is you might have the complete, like, 180-degree different viewpoints and just be the two most different people in the world. And humans are humans, and we're still so much more similar. Even the two most diametrically opposed humans on this earth, from whatever corners of the earth you take them from, you put them together, they're going to be way more similar than they are different, right? When you really look at things. And that's the message. That's that essence. That's what, love thy neighbor, all these things. Like,
yes.
I'll end it with this, because this is the other metaphor that I always use when I'm trying to explain all these things, is like, when you look at what is out there in the universe of just all this matter and all these planets and these gases and stuff, and it's all interesting and it's all vast, and it really shows how small we are. And then you come to our planet, and then you see this amazing thing that is consciousness. That is that same matter, though, those same building blocks that's all out in the universe. In this one place, there's these things that, like what is consciousness? There's no matter that creates consciousness. It is something different. It is something that is created.
It's something bigger than we can understand.
Right. But without that whole, I don't even know how to explain this. This might not make any sense, but
go for it.
If there wasn't those conscious beings, right, and then it goes to humans, none of that is, there's nothing to experience it. The only thing that experiences, or that can even notice the fact that there's all these planets out there, is the fact that we have eyes and that we have brains to process that information and to realize that it's there. Without conscious beings, it's that if a tree falls in the wood, does it make a sound? Because if there's no conscious beings to realize that there's a whole universe out there and how small we are within it, does that universe even exist? Right. Like, and it's in the same point, this amazing lesson about how small we are and how insignificant we are, but also we are everything, because if not for us, none of this even exists, or it becomes a paradoxical question of if it even exists without us. So we're all at the same time as insignificant and just a speck in the timeline of this grand scheme of things. And within that same thing, we are everything, and we are the creators, and we, and that message of God is within us, and that consciousness is what's important, right? Like, to try and explain that to people, along with all those other things, like, these are all, like I say, these are all just like,
easy to get really lost with that.
Exactly. But it's like, again, just painting that picture of, this conversation is a huge step forward in painting my spiritual, whatever picture, right? Like, but I feel like these are all the metaphors I use to get me closer, right? And you have to take them all together and really probably sit and have a lot of conversations with me to really understand where I'm coming from with this. And all of that I just said, that is all taken from people like Aubrey Marcus, from people like Pete Holmes, that I've learned from. All those metaphors all come from it. Because when somebody says it and it just hits you, almost kicks you in the chest, knocks you down into your chair. When somebody says a statement, it's like, oh man, that is true to me, right? And then I've taken all those, and that's what I articulate. And that's why I like to ask those questions to other people, because it's interesting to see what metaphors and what stories and narratives they use to communicate those uncommunicatable things.
I like to use my body as like a kind of like a radar for what I believe in, and also for what feels like truth.
Yeah.
So what I feel is, if there is any physical resistance to an idea, that it just doesn't click with me.
Yeah.
And when I feel this sense of release of the lack of tension, that's where I kind of lean in more and be like, okay, there's something here, and I'm like, my body is physically allowing this, so there must be something deeper into this.
That's
and
beautiful.
So I often use my body as the guidance system. And I think this is like a really good point, and I really, really want to make this point. I'm glad we got to this, but our emotions are literally the guidance system to our soul. Every single time you notice something that makes you angry, frustrated, jealous, I like to say, like, the sins, when you experience like gluttony or greed, or sloth. When you're sloth, when you feel those feelings and you don't feel good. If you listen to your body, you don't feel good after you ate a whole chocolate cake. You don't feel good when you don't. At first, as you're eating it, you feel good, but then the effect at the end is that you overdid it.
Oh yeah,
and
every night. I know it well.
Every night, I know the feeling.
Yeah.
But it's important to pay attention to the thoughts that are going on through those emotions as you're feeling anger and jealousy, especially, and grief. And as you're going through it, these are these emotions are ways for our soul to communicate with us, whether we're on the right path or we're moving away from, like, I believe that there's no way to get off your path. You kind of just take detours, like a scenic route.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually you're going to end up where you need to be, and you'll learn the lessons that you need. Just sometimes we learn other things before other things.
Yeah.
And there is no particular order,
Mm-hmm.
because you are creating your own order as you're experiencing it. But when there is a difference between happiness, so the fleeting feeling of happiness, and then there's joy.
Yeah.
Like bliss. When you're just like in the zone, you're loving it, you're laughing so hard that you're crying, you're just feeling it. You can sometimes feel like you get goosebumps or chills, and you get, it's almost like a rush of energy. You're literally vibrating closer to the energy that your soul is. Your soul vibrates higher than this just physical realm, your body. It's all very low vibrational, because this is where we're at. But as we increase our physical vibration to be with that expression of joy, that's where you are becoming more of who you need to be. So follow that feeling. Every time you do something, even if it's like walking a dog, if you go for your walk with your dog and you just feel fantastic, you feel amazing, then maybe you should be doing that more often.
Yeah.
You know, like whatever it is that gives you that feeling of like, oh, I just love doing that.
Yeah.
Lean into it, because there's something
Chase
really important for you there.
Yeah.
And don't let it get away.
Yeah. Well, fuck. I think that's a perfect way to end this. That was 3 hours of amazing conversation, like we knew we'd have. I have a whole list of topics for next time that we didn't get to that I'm really excited to talk about. But I just wanted to end it with one more thank you, because jumping onto this kind of spiritual journey that I've been on these last couple of years, it's been endlessly helpful to have someone like yourself, where at every point I can kind of just say like, hey, I'm experiencing this. It's kind of weird. And you can say, yeah, I was there, a couple of years, you just always have been a little bit further ahead, and that I can always have someone just to ask my weird spiritual questions. Or sometimes it's just having a really big realization that I can't articulate to anybody, because I just want to understand it, to know that I have someone that I know you will receive it and give me something to chew on back that I'm going to have. And that has been one of the best tools in my tool belt along the journey of this spiritual journey, or whatever you want to call it. And I just want to say a huge thank you for being that for me. Thank you for the conversation we had today. And I'm going to say a future thank you for all the amazing conversations we're going to have over the next couple of months, couple of years, and can't wait to just follow along with your life and your art and everything that you bring. I think you're a joy and you have a great vibration. I'm going to steal your terminology. I think I would use different words before today's conversation, but after I'm going to use that. And I just want to, maybe apologize for maybe not finding how amazing you are sooner, and starting this relationship, this friendship sooner. But I'm so glad that we did, in our weird way of the universe, how it took us on these weird paths and then brought us back. I just think it's beautiful, and I'm thankful for it. And I'm thankful for you, and I'm thankful for your spending your time with me tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Nick. I'm so happy that we knew that it was going to be a long conversation.
Yeah.
But it was really lovely being able to also converse with you over the years and get a little bit deeper, because I don't think either of us saw this turning into a friendship.
Yeah.
I think as the people that we were when we met, we're completely different individuals now. And it's great to be a part of each other's journey, the spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And I love that you feel comfortable enough to express some of your questions and concerns to me, because I feel like a lot of people would feel maybe judged in feeling unsure about where they are in their journey. And I'm just happy that I get to be a part of your learning process. And as we converse, you always get me to kind of dig a little deeper into the subject, which is really good for my own personal growth. And so this is a really like symbiotic relationship, and I'm grateful to have that with you.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and I can't wait to do this again soon. All right. Well, you have a great night. Hey.
Yeah, you too.
All right, see you.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I know it's a little bit more ephemeral, we'll call it maybe, than some of the other episodes. I really love this topic. I know it's probably not for you guys all, but I just got to go at these of what's interesting to me, and I love talking about this shit. I could have this conversation or this type of conversation every single day. It's fascinating to me, and I hope that you guys can hear that passion and maybe take something from it. Maybe if it's not for you, you can skip these kind of ones in the future. But I hope you take what you can get from it, and I hope it helps in some small little way. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode, please do those things. Follow on social media, pass an episode along. If you want to reach out to Denique and tell that you enjoyed it, that really helps in ways that you guys don't always see. You know, like when a guest comes on, they have a good experience and people reach out to them and back that up. It really makes it easier to get those guests back on for future episodes, and to show that to other people that, hey, whenever people come on, they have a great time and it's a great response. It's a really good thing to do. And that helps me just bring on bigger name guests, and maybe guests that have been trying for a while and they're a little bit nervous about it. That all goes to work. And that's how you guys help me make this podcast successful. And I'm so thankful for it. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully I have 2 episodes this week. So I'm looking forward to that. And other than that, see you guys on the next one. Bye. 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 Bye.